Chapter 4784. Arbor liked to check her pulse now that she was free, and she checked her pulse more than 3 times a day. Later on, she felt that she was truly too nervous, which was detrimental to her mother and fetus's physical and mental health, so she simply took out a medical book and calmed her mind while reading. It was late yesterday, so eldest Qin didn't come over to disturb her again. She slept quite well last night and casually ate some plain porridge and side dishes. It was almost noon now, but Arbor still didn't see any trace of eldest young Sir Qin, so she couldn't help but be curious. Could it be that some unforeseen event happened at the River of Forgetfulness? Although Arbor said she wasn't worried, she was still worried about Long Shangyun's safety. This little lady was even younger than her, and her family's circumstances had suddenly changed, so she didn't know where she had drifted off to. "It's fine if I bring the things in. You may withdraw." An arrogant voice came from outside the door. "Miss Yang." The 2 maidservants' delicate voices rang out one after the other. "The young sir has ordered that no one is allowed to casually disturb the honored guest inside." Yang Fengyan glared and stomped her leg. "What, you dare to disobey me? Don't forget, I'm the Qin estate's cousin, miss. Be careful, or you'll have to bear the consequences." The 2 maidservants looked at each other in dismay, simultaneously thunderstruck by this cousin miss. How should they put it? This cousin miss was indeed their Qin estate's cousin miss, but her relationship with the Qin estate's main family was very distant. She was only a woman from a branch family in the lower star domain. If the young sir hadn't stayed in the lower star domain all this time, how could he have gotten involved with this country bumpkin woman? One of the maidservants pursed her lips and secretly winked at the other maidservant, hinting for her to look at Yang Fengyan's arrogant face. It was truly laughable. She was merely a woman from a branch family. She was lucky enough to get involved with a young sir and thought she was someone important. After being brought to the main family, she didn't lead a good life. Every day, she would throw, hit, and drink at them, the servants. Just looking at her was detestable. "Move aside." Yang Fengyan went up and pushed that maidservant, directly squeezing between the 2 of them. She even snatched the tray from a maidservant's hands and walked in with a plate of food. She heavily threw the food on the table in front of the little stoic. Clang! 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 A series of sounds rang out. The originally perfectly covered bowls were all thrown askew by her, and the soup inside spilled out. "Tell me, what will it take for you to scram from our Qin estate's boat? How much do you want before you leave?" Yang Fengyan crossed her legs and sat down in front of Arbor. She took out a soul coin card and slapped it in front of Arbor. She looked at her coldly and said, "Don't you love money as much as your life? Here are 5 million spirit coins. Take them. Take them away, take them all away." Arbor's expression turned gloomy when he saw the soup spill out. At this moment, he saw Yang Fengyan throw a spirit coin card in front of him. He stretched out his hand and put the spirit coin card in his pocket. He stood up and punched Yang Fengyan's big face. The 2 maidservants were speechless. Why did it feel like this stoic-faced little lady didn't play by the rules? He felt that he had been insulted. He could have just treated Miss Biao, but why did he really put that spirit coin card in his pocket? He took someone else's money and punched them in the face without a second word. What kind of trick was this? Arbor wasn't satisfied with one punch. He directly flew up and grabbed Yang Fengyan's braid, flipping her and her stool to the ground. Chapter 4785. Ah! Yang Fengyan rolled to the ground in pain. Her eyes had barely widened when Arbor stomped on her chest and crushed her forcefully. Ah! Yang Fengyan felt like her sternum was about to be crushed by that savage fellow. Her back was embedded in the rectangular chair, and she felt excruciatingly painful everywhere. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Xiao Mu trampled Yang Fengyan under her foot as she stared at her in confusion. Did this girl's head get smashed? Why did it feel like she was even more stupid than when she was on Seacombe Planet? Her soul couldn't have been taken over by someone, right? Arbor was paranoid and had a bellyful of conspiracy theories, as he carefully sized up the woman lying on her back on the ground. Upon closer inspection, he could still see the faint scar on her cheek, which was still half a color difference from the surrounding skin. Sir Jojo had already whipped her in Seacombe Planet's Qin estate, so why didn't she learn her lesson? This young Feng Yen was truly the classic example of forgetting the pain after the wound healed. She clearly knew Sir Jojo's temperament for insulting people, yet she still came to provoke him. If she had the ability to provoke Arbor, then so be it. The main issue was that she couldn't beat him in a fight, nor could she rebuke him. She always came in high spirits only to return in disappointment. Didn't she find it boring? Arbor, you let go, let go, let go. Ow. Young Feng Yen felt like her sternum was about to cave in from that stoic face. Her charming little face couldn't help but turn green, and her entire body trembled in anger. Xiao, Arbor, ah. You stepped on me, ah. Arbor looked at her with an indescribable expression, and he exerted more strength in his foot. Yang Fengyan's breathing stopped, and she almost couldn't catch her breath and completely fainted. When fifth young master Qin heard the news and came over, he saw this scene. Fifth young master wordlessly rushed over and said weakly, Xiao, Miss Xiao, could you first let go of Miss Yang so we can talk? Arbor turned to glance at fifth young master. She was the one who ran over to be beaten. Fifth young master, why do I have nothing to say? Big brother had brought people out to search for Long Shangyun and had yet to return. Why did he have to deal with such a matter? Miss Xiao. Fifth young master braced himself and said, let's not, don't be agitated. Release Miss Yang first. If Miss Yang is in the wrong, then we'll make her apologize to you. When the little stoic heard the words, don't get agitated, she thought that was right and hastily retracted her foot, secretly vexed. She was now the mother of a child. She should be more mature and steady. How could she get angry with Yang Fengyan, this retard? It was simply too impulsive. Arbor glanced at the fifth young master, coughed lightly and retracted his foot. All right, take her out. Don't show her to me before I leave the ship. She's very annoying to look at. Fifth young master's mouth twitched. He nodded and turned to look at Yang Fengyan. Why aren't you helping Miss Yang up? The man's face was cold as he shouted at the two maids who were watching the show. The two maids hastily rushed forward and pulled up Yang Fengyan, who was moaning incessantly, from the ground. It would have been fine if she hadn't moved, but the moment she moved, Yang Fengyan felt like all the bones in her body were falling apart. She felt uncomfortable everywhere, and it hurt so much that her eyebrows twitched. Arbor! Yang Fengyan shrieked. Before she could start cursing, she heard fifth young master interject indifferently, why aren't you helping Miss Yang back to her room to rest? Chapter 4786. The two servant girls looked at each other and hurriedly reached out to support Yang Fengyan, intending to drag her out. However, Yang Fengyan was unwilling. She struggled hard but failed to break free from the two servant girls' arms. She stared at fifth young master with eyes full of grievance and hatred. Fifth brother, you have to stand up for me. Where's eldest cousin? I want to see eldest cousin. This Chiao Mu is simply going too far. Look at how she slapped my face. Just now, she stepped on my chest as if she wanted to break my bones. Arbor looked at her in confusion. Before this woman could continue to complain, he couldn't help but interrupt, didn't you want me to step on you? This strange woman not only had a bad brain, but her memory was even worse. When did I say such a thing? Yang Fengyan's pretty face twisted in anger. Not only do you like to be rough and violent, you even lie through your teeth and accuse me wrongly. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. Just now, you were lying on the ground and kept saying, step on me, step on me, to me. You're not old, but your memory is already bad. Indeed, you're getting more and more stupid as you age. Fifth young master's lips twitched, and he continued to be speechless. Young Feng Yan, who was supported by the two servant girls, was so angry that she looked like she was about to fall to the ground and vomit blood. She found that talking to Arbor was simply too infuriating. She wanted to turn into a wisp of smoke and fly into the sky. Did I ask you to step on me? I was just asking a question, all right? I mean, you dare to step on me. When Arbor heard this, he looked at young Feng Yan with an increasingly strange gaze. What a load of nonsense. I've already stepped on you, and you're still asking me if I dare. If it weren't for her baby, she would have given him another kick to prove whether she dared or not. Calm down, calm down. She was the mother of the baby. She couldn't be so impulsive in the future. She had to think about the baby. Yes, think about it more. She was someone with a baby. Arbor took 2 deep breaths to calm himself down. He stretched out his hand and spread his fingers. His face was expressionless as he said, forget it. I don't want to argue with you. Besides, you're just a patient. I can't be too calculative with you. Young Feng Yan was so angry that her face contorted several times. Her intuition told her that if she questioned the little stoic about her illness, she would definitely receive a very irritating answer. Arbor turned to look at fifth young master and shouted without hesitation, hurry up and take her back. I don't want to see her in front of me for the next few days. Young Feng Yan turned around and called out pitifully, fifth brother. 2 drops of tears rolled down his cheeks. Fifth brother, you just watched as I was humiliated like this. Young Feng Yan said with an aggrieved expression, I want to find eldest cousin and ask him to give me justice. Fifth young Sir Qin's face darkened impatiently. Why are you so nosy? If you're waiting for eldest brother, then wait on the deck. What did you come here for? She clearly knew that this stoic wasn't someone to be trifled with, yet she still insisted on coming here to humiliate herself. If this wasn't stupidity, then what was? Young Feng Yan stomped her foot hatefully. She pointed at Arbor and shrieked, she stole my 5 million spirit coin card. Arbor shook his head. I didn't steal it. Then, with a serious face, he continued, you're the one who delivered yourself to me. Chapter 4787. Fifth young Master Qin looked coldly at young Feng Yan. I will inform eldest brother of everything you did today, no matter how big or small. If you dare to cause trouble again, I will send people to deport you back to the Seekong planet branch family. The fifth young master said icily, think it over. Young Feng Yan's eyes bulged in shock, simply not daring to believe her own ears. Fifth brother actually said he was going to deport her back to the lower star domain. On what basis? Young Feng Yan glared hatefully at Arbor with her beautiful eyes before turning around and dashing out in a fit of anger and impatience. Fifth young Master Qin turned around and said to the little stoic, Miss Qiao, you can stay here at ease. I will send people to supervise Miss Yang and prevent her from coming near and bothering you again. The little stoic naturally wasn't too reassured. Once she had the chance, she naturally had to stay as far away from the Qin estate as possible. At noon, Qin Xian, who had finished patrolling the sea, returned to the ship with a merman riddled with wounds. He brought the merman in front of Arbor. Arbor frowned and stared at him for a while. He vaguely remembered that this person seemed to be called Jiang Song, one of Long Qian's personal guards. The reason why the little stoic remembered a minor character like Jiang Song was that her memory was a bit deep last time, when they were playing horse games with Long Qian and Long Shangyun on the ship. This personal guard named Jiang Song was forced to fill in the spot because they were missing a member. In the end, he lost until he cried for his parents and nearly fainted completely due to chest tightness and dizziness. Jiang Song, this royal guard, gave her a bit of a deep impression. No wonder she could recognize this guy at a glance. When Jiang Song saw Arbor, it was as if he had seen a relative he hadn't seen in 800 years. He threw himself at him while bawling, wiping his tears as he shouted, "Crown Princess, Crown Princess. Hurry and send people to save our miss. Where is your miss? Miss fell into the sea of forgetfulness, so I lost track of her. Arbor, you've been following Long Shangyun all this time, but now you've lost track of her. She's not a living immortal who knows how to calculate. Naturally, she wouldn't know where Long Shangyun went. Furthermore, the river of forgetfulness was so big. If she were to go there alone, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Unless she stepped on some dog shit luck, it would be impossible to find Long Shangyun in a short period of time. Arbor raised his head and met the young master's smiling eyes. "Oh, I went out to sea today and only found this delirious kid nearby. Jojo, just ignore him. Look at him, his words are all jumbled up and illogical. I don't know if his head was injured in the explosion. Men, send him down to rest. Crown Princess, you must help our miss, Crown Princess, Crown Princess." Arbor looked at Jiang Song's back thoughtfully. "Yang Fengyan came to find trouble with you today." The young master walked closer and sat down at the table with a chuckle, pointing at the seat opposite him. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly and asked instead of answering, "Is this ship returning to Dragon Flame City?" I told Jojo earlier. We plan to go to the Pool Lotus Sacred Land to take a look. So this ship wasn't heading to Dragon Flame City in the Divine Continent. As they sailed, they would only get further and further away from the imperial capital. Arbor looked at the young master thoughtfully and asked tentatively, "What if I want to leave?" Eldest young master Qin sighed and said helplessly to her, "Jojo, I'm not putting you under house arrest. Wherever you want to go, just go." Chapter 4788. It's just that you're pregnant now, so it's inconvenient for you to move around. If possible, why don't you recuperate for a while? When you're healthy, you can go wherever you want. We definitely won't stop you. Upon hearing this, Xiao Mu raised her elegant brows. You know. Eldest Qin smiled helplessly. I found several physicians to check on your condition. How could I not know? Seeing that he answered fairly sincerely, Xiao Mu nodded her small head. She pretended to be nonchalant and asked, "Did you leak the news to Qin Xian that I'm here?" Eldest young Sir Qin shook his head. I didn't say anything. For some reason, Arbor actually heaved a sigh of relief. She really didn't want to see Omega Kotoku in this unfavorable situation. Even if she did, she would feel like she had nothing to say. She was even more unwilling to be entangled with this person. Everything could wait until her divine perception recovered. She would bide her time for now. He spread out his divine perception on Zhualan Mountain and returned empty-handed after a round. He turned to shake his head at Mo Lien and Ma Shichen. In my humble opinion, you two must be overthinking. It wasn't like he hadn't stayed in the abyss of the sacrificial sea before. How many years had he stayed in this place? How could he not know if there was anything strange in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? The two youngsters were overthinking because it was their first time in the abyss of the sacrificial sea and they were unaccustomed and fearful. Once they were used to it, they could stay anywhere they wanted. Mo Lien glanced at the human snake. After a moment of silence, she suddenly asked, "Since you were able to escape the abyss of the sacrificial sea once, can you do it a second and third time?" "You're thinking too much." The human snake said expressionlessly, "I was able to leave successfully last time because someone summoned me. Besides, the abyss of the sacrificial sea is a deep pressure. It's impossible for it to let people like us go. Once you fall into the abyss of the sacrificial sea, you can forget about walking out alive." The human snake's head drooped. To be honest, he already couldn't remember how many seasons he had stayed in this dark place where he couldn't even see his fingers. If he had to recall well, most of the time, he seemed to be hibernating. He didn't open his eyes much and couldn't sense the changes in the outside world. "We won't be able to crawl out," the snake man said dejectedly. This fellow had probably tried to climb up from here more than once, and each time, he had failed. Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen saw his gloomy expression and couldn't help but glance at him. "This path is blocked, but it doesn't mean that other paths are blocked as well." Mo Lien walked forward for a while, then suddenly stopped and asked, "Is there an underground water source nearby?" The snake man listened attentively, frowned, and thought for a moment. Then, he nodded and said, "Probably. Don't look at me like that. Even though I was imprisoned in the sacrificial sea abyss, as you can see, the underground abyss is well connected. At that time, I had no idea where I was being held." "Then how did you come out after you were summoned?" Mo Lien was keenly aware of this problem. The human snake man was stunned for a moment, then he said, "I thought I saw a light floating in front of me. It was like a guiding light, guiding me all the way." Mo Lien muttered to herself, "Was this really Long Qian's summoning?" Yuan Shichen frowned. "The sound of the water is getting louder. Let's go and take a look. Could it be that there's another gathering place deep underground?" Chapter 4789. The human snake from Mtiswalan was at the very front. He moved very quickly. Although he did not retract his tail and his body looked very large, he was very agile and made no sound when he swam. Mo Lien and Hu Shichen followed behind him. They walked for about 10 minutes in the pitch-black darkness. Suddenly, a very thin ray of light appeared in front of them. It was like a glimmer of light seeping through a crack in the stone wall. Hu Shichen and Mo Lien looked at each other and hurriedly quickened their pace. That human snake had already slithered ahead. He swam rapidly in front of them for a few minutes like an arrow released from a bow. He suddenly stopped. Mo Lien and Hu Shichen, who were following closely behind him, did not expect this guy to suddenly stop. They almost stepped on his tail. Hu Shichen slapped him in annoyance and growled in a low voice, "What are you doing?" The human snake hurriedly waved at them. "Come here quickly." For some reason, Hu Shichen felt that this stinky snake was a little funny. When this stinky snake went berserk, his combat strength was amazing. Who would have thought that after he returned to normal, he would be so stupid? The contrast between before and after was so great that Hu Shichen sometimes could not react. The two of them followed and floated behind the human snake to stand still. Looking forward from their angle, they happened to see a strange sight. There was a huge sinkhole in front of them. Dozens of men and women in strange clothes were worshipping the sinkhole devoutly. They kowtowed again and again, their heads hitting the ground. Every time they knocked their heads, there would be a dong-dong sound. It was obvious that they used a lot of force. The three of them looked at each other in shock. Mo Lien lowered her voice and said, "Didn't you say that you've lived here for hundreds of years? Have you never seen these people before?" The human snake looked confused. "No. I haven't. I don't think I've been here before, and I've never seen such a huge sinkhole." Hu Shichen could not help but twitch the corner of her mouth. "I suspect that this human snake did not fall to the bottom at the beginning." "What do you mean?" the human snake asked, puzzled. "It's where you were imprisoned. It's probably above this place." He-Chen rolled his eyes and pointed at the dark sky. They had fallen from the bottomless pit, so it was very likely that the snake man had not fallen to the bottom in the first place. Ever since he fell in, he had been suppressed by the mysterious force of nature at the bottom of the pit. Perhaps he was just a careless person. When he felt that he couldn't break free, he fell into hibernation. Hu Shichen felt that he was most likely a few steps closer to the truth. He silently looked up and exchanged a glance with Crown Prince Lien beside him. Mo Lien didn't want to talk to this stupid snake. One of the leaders of the group of people who were kneeling and performing the sacrificial ceremony suddenly looked in their direction vigilantly and scolded coldly, "Who's there?" Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen looked at each other and nodded. Then, they walked out of the darkness and appeared in front of the group of people. Everyone hurriedly stood up from the side of the sinkhole and guarded the side of the sinkhole. Pairs of eyes looked at them in bewilderment. The leader of the group walked out of the crowd with a hunched back and a walking stick. He only had one pitch-black eye. Just like that, he stared fixedly at Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen and sized them up. Then, he spoke in a ghostly and sinister voice, "Who are you?" His gaze landed on the human snake man, and his pupils constricted slightly. There was a small commotion in the crowd. Chapter 4790. Someone tries his best to restrain his trembling voice and screams, "It's the human snake, it's that human snake. Don't panic, don't panic." The old man once again lets out a cold and calm voice, pacifying the crowd. Don't forget, in this place, the higher your cultivation base, the more you will be suppressed. A vicious glint flashed across that elder's eyes, and he stared at Mo Lien and Guchen in amusement. Shouldn't everyone be very happy that 3 more slaves have come to our kingdom of sin? The group of people behind him is startled, then suddenly bursts into cheers. One of the older men says excitedly, "That's great, it came down, this human snake finally came down, it's no longer blocking the entrance to the top. As long as we kill it, won't we be able to get out?" Yes, 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 yes. Amori is right, let's kill this human snake. Yes, kill it, we can get out. Zuolan Shan looks at Mo Lien and He Chen with a blank expression. Look at these people's excited expressions, how come I don't remember meeting them before? He Chen can't help but roll his eyes, it should be you who blocked their path after hibernation. He pauses, his gaze immediately turns to the sinkhole where everyone is kneeling. This sinkhole wouldn't be the entrance they fell from, right? Mo Lien shakes her head, impossible. Looking at this position, it doesn't feel like it. Moreover, if we would appear here after falling, then why would we fall up here? It took us 2 days to walk all the way up here. He Chen thinks about it and says with a puzzled expression, then why are they praying to this sinkhole? Just as they are talking, some scattered things emerge from the sinkhole. The sinkhole is filled with white fog, only a trace of light is floating inside. The trace of light that Mo Lien and the others saw from afar came from here. Ah, thank God for the gift. Thank God for the gift. These people kneel down and kowtow to the sinkhole, each one of them is acting weird, they look like lunatics. Mo Lien was speechless. These people didn't care about the 3 of them. They dug out the broken things from the heavenly pit and bowed to the heavenly pit with pious faces. They cleaned up the things that came out of the sinkhole and cried out in surprise, "It's a big bag of beans." Heavens, this person actually has beans in his inner world. This is too awesome. Wow, clothes, several sets of clean clothes. Mine, this is mine, alright, everyone, don't fight for it. The old man's eyes flashed, and he said coldly, let's pack up first and return to the Great Lord. Don't forget that all resources have to be handed over to the Great Lord before they are distributed. Everyone resentfully retracted their hands, and their gazes once again landed on Mo Lien, He Chen, and the other 2. One of them smiled wretchedly at the old man. These boys are quite good-looking. Shall we offer them to the High Lord as well? The old man nodded and was about to give the order to tie up Mo Lien and the other 2. Then, he heard a clamor from behind the sinkhole. Everyone turned around and saw a few well-dressed guards with whiskers escorting a young man all the way over. What's going on? Chapter 4791. The High Lord has ordered us to push this unappreciative thing into the sinkhole to be dealt with. The old man in the lead suddenly revealed a troubled expression and hesitantly asked, Commander, has the High Lord really made up his mind? Previously, he had said that he wanted to bury this person alive, but when things came to a head, he couldn't bear to do it and hurriedly found someone to bring him back. Fortunately, they didn't really bury this ancestor alive at that time, or else they would have to be buried with him. The High Lord has said that he won't change his mind this time. One of the guards waved his hand impatiently and said angrily. You don't know what's good for you. The High Lord is so good to you, and you still dare to make excuses. Since the High Lord has completely lost interest in you, you have no value to exist anymore. It's better to extract all the things in his inner world. Okay. The elderly man looked at the young man who had his head lowered in puzzlement, as if he didn't know how this person had angered the High Lord to this extent. If the High Lord really wanted to kill him, no matter how much he admired and liked this person, he wouldn't be merciful to him. The elderly man shook his head helplessly and couldn't help but step forward to persuade him. Little brother, you've been in our territory for almost 3 months. Actually, if you're willing to give in and say a few soft words to our High Lord, this matter will probably be over just like that. The elderly man suddenly saw the young man raise his head and look in his direction. His gaze was cold and cheerless. Don't talk nonsense with him, just push him down. The leader of the guards shouted impatiently. The elderly man sighed helplessly and signaled to the surrounding onlookers with his eyes. Immediately, 2 burly men stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right. They grabbed the young man's arms and effortlessly dragged him to the sinkhole. The leader of the guards unconsciously glanced in the direction of Mo Lien and the others. His eyes lit up and instantly widened. Who are they? Reporting to the commander, the 3 of them are newcomers. The human snake in front is the one who has been blocking our exit and not letting us out. So it's him. The commander glanced at the snake man with joy. So, the exit passage is now open. The old man hurriedly nodded. Indeed. That's great. The guard leader nodded and smiled at the old man. Old Zhang, you did well this time. The 2 new men were even more handsome than the young man who was about to be thrown into the sinkhole. I'm sure the great lord will like it even more. After sending away a troublesome manservant and recruiting 2 more, the great feudal lord would definitely reward him handsomely if this matter was settled. On the other side, the young man was about to be pushed into the sinkhole. In the blink of an eye, Mo Lien took out a handful of shooting star powder and threw it towards the crowd. The meteors scattered, and countless sparks ignited the corners of everyone's clothes. Everyone screamed and hastily patted away the sparks on their bodies. The elderly man looked up and saw that the snake man and the 2 beautiful men had all disappeared. Not only that, even the young man who was about to be pushed into the sinkhole was nowhere to be seen. Hurry up and look for him. The elderly man's cold voice sounded again. In any case, they couldn't run out of the range of this underground passage. It was impossible for them to escape from here with their strength. Chapter 4792. Mo Lien threw a shooting star scatter while Hu Shichen went to grab the young man. The 4 of them quickly ran away, retracing their steps without looking back. Seeing that they did not chase after them, Mo Lien and Hu Shichen stopped and turned to look at the young man who was panting. He looked young and his cultivation level was not low. Why was he panting after just a few steps? The young man held onto the wall with one hand and shook his head at them. I can't run anymore. 7th Yen, who had transformed into a small dragon and had been coiling around Mo Lien's wrist, suddenly transformed into a human and jumped in front of the young man. He scolded him coldly, "You're so young, but you're panting so hard after just a few steps. Don't focus too much on improving your cultivation level. While improving, your body's quality has to keep up." The young man looked at 7th Yen speechlessly and laughed bitterly. This place is oppressed by the laws of nature. The higher one's cultivation level is, the greater the suppression. He suddenly paused and looked at Mo Lien and Hu Shichen in confusion. He could feel that these 2 people's cultivation levels were much higher than his. Why were their movements so agile, as if they were not suppressed? "You're not suppressed." "Yes." Hu Shichen complained bitterly. "It's so uncomfortable." It hurts everywhere. My bones are sore all over. Also, I feel like my body is heavy after just a few steps. I can't move my legs. Mo Lien glanced at him speechlessly, then looked at the young man who was panting. She asked, "You were originally at Mystique Venerable rank, right?" Being able to reach Mystique Venerable rank at such a young age meant that he was quite talented. This young man should be quite famous in the Jianghu. Mo Lien asked tentatively, "What's your name?" "I'm Shen Wu. Thank you for saving me just now." "Shen Wu. You're from the Shen family manor in Sichuan, right?" "That's right." Chen Wu nodded with a slightly excited expression. "This one is alone and has gone out to gain experience. I encountered a large waterspout in the Sea of Forgetfulness and was swept into the undercurrent at the bottom of the sea. Then, as if falling into a bottomless pit, I fell all the way here." Mo Lien and Yuan Shichen looked at each other. "You don't know where this is? I hope the two of you will be kind enough to inform us." "This is the River of Forgetfulness's sacrificial sea abyss." Mo Lien looked at him speechlessly. This Shen Wu was really unlucky. He had only come out to train, but he had actually been swept all the way to the seabed abyss. "Brother Shen, why were they worshipping at the side of the giant sinkhole just now?" At this point, Shen Wu's face turned slightly pale. "I only know that after they push a living person down, there's an extremely powerful nature deprivation force inside that will grind the living person to pieces and clear out all the items in their inner world." No wonder that person shouted, "A big bag of beans," in surprise just now. It turned out that these people had pushed some foreign cultivators into the sinkhole, deprived them of their inner worlds, and obtained other people's food and tools. "What you mean is, those cultivators who unluckily fell into this place from the Sea of Forgetfulness, the stronger their cultivation. In the end, he was suppressed and weakened instead." "That's right." Shen Wu nodded and panted as he said, "They call this place the Kingdom of Sin. The natives of this place have taken a group of cultivators with extremely strong cultivation from the outside as slaves." Mo Lien was speechless. Chapter 4793. Hu Shichen was also speechless. Therefore, they should be thankful that they only felt a heavy pressure on their bodies, but they were not suppressed to the freezing point like the young man in front of them. Shen Wu looked at them suspiciously and thought to himself, "Why are these two sirs acting like nothing happened? Just now, when they saved me and left, their speed was so fast that it didn't seem like they were absolutely suppressed. So, how big of a difference was there between people?" Hu Shichen looked at the young man expressionlessly and coughed lightly. "Brother Shen, you mean, there is a city in the seabed abyss?" Mo Lien's mouth was truly accurate. Everything he said was spot on. There really was a gathering place here. Shen Wu nodded hurriedly. Zuolanshan asked in confusion, "How is that possible? I have lived here for at least 200 years, how come I have never known that there is a city in the seabed abyss?" Hu Shichen interrupted him unhappily. "I said, you hibernated for so long, anything is possible." Zuolanshan thought carefully. It was true, he had hibernated for a long time, so long that he could not even remember the length of time. Where did the people in the seabed abyss come from? Zuolanshan's eyes were filled with a strange light. It was as if he thought that he had lived alone in the seabed abyss for hundreds of years and was pitifully poisoned. Actually, there were a lot of neighbors next door, but he did not know anything about them after living here for so long. Those natives, I guess they are the sea people who were exiled here. Some of them have fish tails, I guess they are people of the Forgotten River Dragon family. Hu Shichen was surprised. Isn't the sacrificial sea abyss a place to worship the souls in the sea? Mo Lien stood at the side and shook her head, showing a "I knew it" expression. She said indifferently, "It is recorded in the mountain anomaly records. The sea was not peaceful in the early years. Many sea clans fought with each other. In the beginning, the sacrificial sea abyss was used by the Forgotten River Dragon clan and a few other aristocratic families to exile traders. Most of the people who are exiled to the abyss of the sacrificial sea are extremely evil. Realization dawned on Ma Shichen. So, according to what Shen Brat said, the natives of the evil kingdom are actually the people of the aristocratic families that were exiled from the sea. Mo Lien nodded. I guess so. What do they eat when they live in this damned place? He Chen was a little surprised. These people were able to survive in such a harsh environment. How strong were their survival skills? Chen Wu nodded. Nothing can grow here, and it's very far from the surface of the sea. Compared to food, the lack of water is a bigger problem. But they soon discovered the existence of the sinkhole. In the beginning, they fought and killed each other. They pushed a portion of the people into the heavenly pit, plundered the resources of the inner world, and shared it among themselves, Shen Wu said with a heavy expression. Gradually, the longer they stay here, the fewer resources they can plunder from the inner world, Shen Wu said. After all, they're just sitting around and eating until they run out of food. Every day that passes means one less day of food. Later, they climbed up the stone wall and found a large glacier above. They chiseled a portion of the ice off and used it as a water source. But the more they use, the less ice they have. Chapter 4794. The natives of the Kingdom of Sin would kill for a little water, a little bean. They became more and more violent, killing each other, until one day outsiders entered their territory. Shen Wu sighed. At first, they were very afraid, but after probing, they found out that among the outsiders, there was a higher cultivation level. On the contrary, the higher the cultivation level, the more severely they were suppressed. Like me, after I came here, I couldn't even take a few steps without gasping for breath. On the contrary, the ordinary people who came here were all walking as if they were flying, their bodies were not suppressed at all. After they joined the Kingdom of Sin, they were also able to receive better treatment. This allowed them to find a new way to quickly gather resources. They captured these outsiders, those who could be used for hard work, and those who could not be used were thrown into the sinkhole to quickly gather resources. Wait. He Chen said curiously, from what you're saying, what you mean is that the natives of the Kingdom of Sin are not affected by this power of suppression? No. Shen Wu nodded with certainty. Today, there are about 50 natives. Most of them are above the deity realm, and are not suppressed at all. They belong to a special group in the Kingdom of Sin. Ma Shichen pondered and nodded, so, the outsiders with high cultivation were suppressed like dogs, while the natives were all in the god realm. No wonder these outsiders were all reduced to slaves. Aren't they just a bunch of lambs waiting to be slaughtered? Mo Lien said indifferently. There is nothing special about them. Just like the power of deprivation allowed by the natural law in the sinkhole, it is fair to everyone, whoever is thrown in will also be deprived. The reason why the natives are so special must be that they have a secret. They can avoid being suppressed by the natural law here. Ma Shichen nodded repeatedly upon hearing this. Although Mo Lien, this guy, normally looked very loathsome, his analytical skills were still very reliable. This was most likely the truth, there was nothing special about it at all. It was the natives who had mastered the risk of avoiding the natural law's suppression, so they could do whatever they wanted here. Chen Wu looked doubtfully at Mo Lien and He Chen. Your Excellencies, are you not being suppressed, or is it that the suppression is not complete? It should be the second situation you mentioned. Hu Shichen smiled bitterly. What about this senior holy beast? The snake man proudly raised his chin, thought for a moment, and said, I think it's okay. There is indeed a suppressive force, but it's not that strong. You should be the guardian beast placed at the exit of the sacrificial sea by the aristocratic families of the River of Forgetfulness. Chen Wu continued talking to himself, I've heard them mention you before. It's because you're guarding the exit of the sacrificial sea that the people of Sin Kingdom have no choice but to stay here and continue to suffer. Hu Shichen pursed his lips and patted Shen Wu's shoulder. You're thinking too much. He was banished here 100 years ago. Because he was too bored, he had been hibernating all this time. Even without him guarding the exit of the sacrificial sea abyss, they wouldn't be able to leave. Even the heavenly Tao might not be able to do anything about the natural absorption and suppression power of this place. It is innate and does not go against the laws of the heavenly Tao. Chapter 4795. Thinking of her and Mo Lian's situation, a trace of worry flashed across her eyes. She really shouldn't be gloating over others' misfortune. After all, they were both unlucky and couldn't leave the abyss of the sacrificial sea. A trace of anxiety flashed across Shen Wu's eyes. Are we going to stay like this for the rest of our lives? Of course it's impossible. Mo Lian replied icily as he walked forward. Shen Wu was taken aback. Your Excellency, are you going back to Sin City? If you don't have a foolproof plan, it's best that we don't go back first. There are about 200 citizens in Sin City. Other than the 50 over aboriginals, the remaining people are not to be trifled with. The slaves are currently working in the karst cave. Their High Lord, GC, has a wild idea and wants to turn the karst cave into a sleeping chamber. Mo Lian stopped and turned to look at Shen Wu. You stay here first. Your Excellencies aren't familiar with Sin City. If you insist on going, I'll take you through a small path. It'll be more discreet. After all, I've escaped from Sin City 5 or 6 times. I'm quite familiar with the complicated corridors. Shen Wu smiled bitterly and nodded at Mo Lian and the rest. Glancing at him, Yuan Shichen deliberated and asked, I heard the guard's words just now. Did the Great Lord capture you and make you the commander-in-chief? Looks like this guy won't give in even if he dies. Shen Wu's handsome face was slightly embarrassed. He hurriedly said, I'm already engaged. Of course, I can't betray my fiancée. Although we've never met. Our marriage was arranged by my family. No, but I thought, since we're engaged, then I'm her fiancée. I must be loyal to her. Mo Lian's eyes brightened. She went forward and patted Shen Wu's shoulder, revealing an admiring expression. You're not bad. Shen Wu was inexplicably admired by Prince Mo, although he did not understand where this sir's admiration came from. When he heard this sir say, I will take you out of here, to him, he inexplicably felt like he had found a powerful backer. His mood suddenly became a lot more cheerful, as if the promise of this distinguished person in front of him would definitely be fulfilled. Yuan Shichen glanced at Prince Mo speechlessly. Then, he turned around and exchanged glances with Snake Man, who was still confused about the situation. Swolon Mountain, how is your current situation? About 50%, the Snake Man answered honestly. Yu Qin cursed inwardly, damn. This human snake was indeed cunning. No wonder when he bumped into him in the corridor earlier, he tried to curry favor with them and acted as if he wanted to befriend them. He also repeatedly stated that the reason why he fought with them before was because he had been poisoned with the berserk potion. It turned out that this fellow's strength had been suppressed by half. He recognized the reality at a glance and quickly pretended to be a glutton, acting obedient in front of them. He and Mo Lian should have been suppressed by 30% of their strength. If the two of them joined forces, they could definitely beat Snake Man to a pulp at that time. Damn, the two of them were so smart, but they were actually tricked by this old ghost. Snake Man secretly glanced at Yuan Shichen. His bold face was a bit awkward. Don't misunderstand. I'm not afraid of you, so I reconciled with you. This old man thinks that I don't have any deep hatred with you two juniors. Chapter 4796. The reason why we fought was all because of those scoundrels from Wang Chuan Dragon Clan. We have the same goal now, which is to leave the abyss of the sacrificial sea. So, it's necessary to put aside our prejudices for now, isn't it? Like hell I'll believe you. Ji-chen rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. The snake person glanced at Mo Lien again and studied his expression. He discovered that this young man's expression was apathetic, and when his phoenix eyes swept over him, they were cold and desolate. For some reason, he felt a chill down his spine. From his experience, this young man did not seem like a good person who would repay evil with kindness. Let's go. Mo Lien spat out this word without even looking back as he led the way forward. The snake man was right about one thing. Now that they had the same goal, they should leave first. As for the debt between him and this stinky snake, he would settle it one day. Did he think that he could let it go just like that? Dream on. After all, this stinky snake was the reason why he and Hu Shichen fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea so miserably. The snake man felt a gust of cold wind above his head and his body trembled for no reason. Just as he was about to shift, he saw Hu Shichen glancing at him coldly. Why are you looking at me like that? What was wrong with these two young men? They gave off a sinister vibe when they looked at others. I just wanted to remind you that your current form is a little too much. Hu Shichen sneered. The snake man looked down at himself. He was now a snake with a human body and a snake tail. He was about 2.5 meters tall and felt comfortable looking down at Mo Lien and Hu Shichen. However, he knew that they were about to sneak into the city of Sin. This beast form would be very eye-catching and he might be targeted immediately. The snake man obediently transformed into a human. Hu Shichen turned around and his jaw almost dropped. You! Big brother, wear pants. Mo Lien was speechless. Fortunately, his wife was not here. Otherwise, he would have destroyed this serpent's body. The snake man, this old man has never transformed into a human in the past. This was the dignity of an almighty holy beast. Their beast form was their true glory. He looked a little embarrassed and tried to defend himself. It's all your fault. What change? Hurry up and lend me a pair of pants. Mo Lien. Fortunately, Shen Wu reacted quickly. He immediately took out a new set of clothes from his inner world and offered it to Senior Snake with both hands. The corner of Zhualanshan's mouth twitched imperceptibly. He expressionlessly took the clothes and put them on. He coldly said, "You brat, this old man will remember you." Shen Wu was speechless. It was clearly a sentence of gratitude, but why did it sound like revenge when Senior Lan Shan said it? With Shen Wu leading the way, the four of them quietly took a small path to the back door of Nifa's city. During this period, they did not encounter the old man and his group who had previously worshipped the sinkhole. Wait a moment, Mo Lien said in a low voice. Then, she took out 4 blue paper charms from her sleeve and distributed them to everyone. Ji Chen's eyes lit up. Snake Man and Chen Wu looked at him in confusion. What is this? Hu Shichen hurriedly opened the paper charms and said in a low voice, "Don't ask so much. Use it. It's good stuff." In just a few seconds, Snake Man and Chen Wu saw that Hu Shichen's appearance had changed drastically. He transformed from a handsome young man into an ordinary young man at the prime of his life. With such an average-looking face, he would definitely not attract anyone's attention in a crowd. Chapter 4797. Is this the legendary transformation talisman? Shen Wu held the talisman in his hand excitedly and turned to look at Mo Lien. Seeing that Mo Lien had also applied the talisman to herself, Shen Wu hurriedly followed suit. In just a moment, the 4 people's appearances had changed drastically. Mo Lien had turned into an ordinary middle-aged man. Everyone was stunned. She really didn't expect that a peerlessly handsome man with peerless talent would turn into an ordinary commoner after activating the transformation talisman. Shenwu had also turned into an ordinary-looking young man. There was an additional birthmark on his face, which made him look very different from his original handsome appearance. The worst one was probably the human snake. He simply could not believe it. He looked down at his bare body and fixed his gaze on that pair of small hands. The clothes that Shenwu had offered were now all piled up at his feet. He crawled out from the pile of clothes. His small body was about the size of a 5 or 6-year-old child. His black eyes were filled with embarrassment and indignation. He glared at Mo Lien and shouted angrily, What is going on? Don't shout. Hu Shichen hurriedly covered his mouth, a mischievous smile flashing across her eyes. Why do you always like to be naked? Hu Shichen coughed lightly and rummaged through her inner world. She took out a piece of girl's clothing and threw it to him. Make do with this. Isn't this a girl's clothing? The human snake was even more furious. His shouts were still suppressed by Hu Shichen's palm. Why are you shouting? Aren't we just making do with it for a while? When we enter the city and see a tailor shop, I'll buy you another one that fits you. Shenwu, brothers, this is the city of sin, where resources are scarce. There are no tailor shops, jewelry shops and the like, which are available in big cities, here. The human snake glared at them angrily. I'm not wearing it. Then you can be naked, Mo Lien said expressionlessly. As long as you're not afraid of being ugly, your father is also not afraid of being embarrassed. The human snake. This fellow's little face instantly flushed red. He pointed his little finger at Mo Lien and trembled. You. This guy actually dared to take advantage of this old man and claim to be his father. Mo Lien was still expressionless. She reached out and lifted the little body of the snake man. In order to prevent others from spying on you, from now on, your identity is my son. They are your uncles. Ma Shichen held back her laughter and finally swallowed it back into her stomach. The corner of Shenwu's mouth twitched. Seeing Snake Man's sullen and angry glare, he waved his hand repeatedly. You flatter me, you don't have to call me uncle. Be careful when an outsider comes to investigate. Shichen thought, Shenwu, this child. He's been corrupted by Prince Mo so quickly. Mo Lien said coldly, get used to your status. Call me father. Achoo. Arbor rubbed his little nose and put down the medical book in his hand. He subconsciously stroked his little belly and muttered to himself, if Jojo's Lotus knew that he was going to be a father, I wonder how happy he would be. A few poison-tailed butterflies fluttered in through the window and landed in the palm of her hand. Still can't find it. Arbor sighed and raised a hand to stroke the butterfly's wings. But it was true. This place was vast and boundless. It was indeed very difficult for these poison-tailed butterflies that she kept in the storage talisman to find little Taisui. It was her fault for not being able to open the star domain. If she had more poison-tailed butterflies, she could track little Taisui in all directions. Chapter 4798. That day, after she and the little Taisui were blasted away by the sea's explosion, she was picked up by eldest Qin, but the little Taisui was nowhere to be found. Although she didn't say anything, she secretly released the poison-tailed butterflies to search for it. Some things didn't need to be done by others, especially those from the Qin estate. Arbor didn't want to owe any of them a favor. Xiao Mu sighed. Although she was anxious, there was nothing she could do for the time being. Her divine sense wasn't stable, so she couldn't open her star domain. Even if she was anxious, she couldn't rush it. Hopefully, the soul calming pill she took every day could help her recover as soon as possible. Laughter came from outside the door. Arbor was so noisy that she could only put down the medical book in her hand and put it away in her storage talisman. Who's making so much noise over there? A maidservant immediately walked over and bowed respectfully. Today's weather is good. Miss, do you want to take a walk on the deck? Miss Yang, Sister Ping, and the others are fishing on the deck. Arbor expressionlessly said, oh. As soon as she heard that Moran Yang Fengyan was making a fuss on the deck with a few other women, she didn't want to go anywhere. She just wanted to lie down in the cabin for a while. However, Yang Fengyan, Ping, and the other women were too noisy. It was impossible for her to fall asleep. After lying on the bed for a while, Arbor was about to fall asleep in a daze when she heard a light knock on the door. The maidservant went to open the door and cautiously said, Miss is asleep. The one who came to knock was an old mama. Hearing this, she was startled. It's almost evening. Miss hasn't woken up from her afternoon nap. What's the matter? Arbor's cold voice sounded. It was like jade beads rolling into a jade plate. The crisp tinkling sound made people's hearts tremble. The mama didn't dare to be impudent. She hurriedly said, Miss Biao and Miss Ping, invite you to the deck to get some fresh air. Arbor couldn't help but sneer in her heart. They're here to cause trouble again. It seems they really want to die. Lord Jojo had never been someone who was afraid of trouble. Just like the divine flower of the snow domain, if someone came to provoke her again and again, then don't blame her for directly crushing them to death. After washing up, a certain person chose a bright red battle suit and went out valiantly. He had made a lot of unique battle suits a while ago. The skirt was embroidered with black lotus flowers, and there were 2 small golden beads on the sleeves. The little stoic expressionlessly walked to the deck. A woman with a voluptuous figure walked up to her and gave her a hypocritical smile. She called out softly, Crown Princess, you're finally willing to come out for a walk. Arbor gave her a significant look. The woman felt as if she was being stared at by something, and all the hair on her body stood on end. Why did it feel so strange? He felt that the Crown Princess at this moment was inexplicably very dangerous. Arbor's slightly cold eyes looked at the woman beside the railing not far away. Yang Fengyan and the 2 little maidservants beside her had their backs to him. Sure enough, Yang Fengyan was holding a fishing rod, and the 2 maidservants were giggling and jumping next to her. They said repeatedly, Miss, you're so amazing. You've already caught your 3rd fish. Crown Princess, there's another fishing rod over there. Do you want to try it? Ping asked with a grin. Not interested. The little Crown Princess directly rejected Ping expressionlessly, causing the latter's bellyful of words to abruptly stop. Chapter 4799. This feeling was truly terrible. It was as if a fist landed on a ball of cotton. She couldn't find a place to exert force even if she wanted to. The little Crown Princess's lukewarm attitude made Miss Ping feel awkward, and she inexplicably found it difficult to continue the conversation. If Miss Ping interacted with the little stoic for a long time, she would certainly understand that this was the little Crown Princess's unique ability to kill conversations. The woman chuckled awkwardly and then said, Then Crown Princess, just sit here for a while and enjoy the sea breeze. You can't stay cooped up in the room all the time. It's easy to get sick from boredom. Your whole family is sick. Arbor couldn't be bothered to pay attention to this chattering woman. With a glance, he sat down at the table with tea and snacks on the side of the deck. Ping walked up with a smile and sat down next to the little Crown Princess. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard the little stoic ask coldly, Who are you? Everyone, the little Crown Princess was seriously too much. She had already stayed on this ship for several days, but she actually didn't even recognize Miss Ping, who was by the eldest young sir's side. Ping-er's expression also completely froze because of the Crown Princess's words. She finally found her voice after searching for a while. Miss Ping-er smiled even more awkwardly and said, Crown Princess, you're a noble person with a forgetful memory. We've even met a few times in the Guqin Gardens when we were on Seacombe Planet. The young Crown Prince Consort looked her up and down. Is that so? If it weren't for the fact that Ping knew that the seemingly harmless little stoic in front of her actually had an extremely formidable and outstanding trait, she would have slapped her face. She really wanted to give this stoic a big slap across her face. Who told you to look down on people and not recognize me? You'll get it later. Ping bit her lips awkwardly and said with a mocking laugh, "It's fine even if the Crown Princess doesn't remember. We'll be on the same ship in the future, so we'll be familiar with each other after talking more." "Who's on the same ship as you?" The little stoic harumphed and turned her head around, her gaze landing on Yang Fengyan's back. "You guys didn't invite me to sit on the deck because there's a big show for me to watch later, right?" Ping's heart skipped a beat, but she steadied her expression and didn't reveal any clues in front of the little stoic. She believed that she and Yang Fengyan had a tacit understanding of each other, so it was impossible for them to be exposed. It seemed that even though this little crown princess had been invited by them, she was still very wary of them. That sentence just now was actually to test her, wasn't it? Although she was young, she seemed to be extremely scheming. You couldn't see any emotion on her paralyzed face, so you couldn't get any information from her face. As Chiao Mu sat there, she leisurely twisted the white jade bracelet on her wrist. Suddenly, the sound of water splashing could be heard. The two maidservants beside Yang Fengyan jumped up and down in surprise. "Miss, it's here, it's here. It's another big fish." Yang Fengyan's back was facing Arbor, and the corners of her mouth secretly hooked up in a cold smile. Suddenly, she flicked her wrist and hooked the fishing line. A big fish that seemed to weigh about 10 caddies was dragged out of the water by her. It created a splash in the air. The heavy fish was lifted up by the fishing rod and spun half a circle in the air. Then, the fish suddenly broke free from the fishing line and smashed down toward where Arbor was sitting. With Arbor's eyesight, he had already seen the big fish's true appearance when Yang Fengyan reeled in the line. A pair of dead fish eyes emitted an abnormal green light. Chapter 4800. The fish's mouth opened and closed, revealing 2 rows of ghastly fangs. This wasn't a normal fish at all, but a gigantic corpse fish. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes, and he glanced at the gigantic corpse fish pouncing at him. Suddenly, his body flashed to the left. The speed of the teleportation talisman was so fast that it dazzled the eyes. Miss Ping simply didn't see clearly how the young crown princess moved. When she turned her head back, the crown princess was already standing at the cabin door. At the same time, that gigantic corpse fish landed next to her feet with a plop, opening its mouth to reveal 2 rows of saw-like fangs. Crunch! The big corpse fish bit the leg of the stool and immediately bit it into 2. Miss Ping jumped in fright and hastily retreated with small, quick steps. Her charming face instantly turned ghastly pale, and she let out a cry of alarm. Mississippi, upon seeing this, the 2 robust elderly nannies beside her hastily came forward to support her. However, that gigantic corpse fish suddenly leaped up and bit at one of the elderly nanny's leg. Crack! The corpse fish bit empty air, but the sound of the 2 rows of saw-like fangs snapping together made Miss Ping and those 2 elderly nannies jump in fright. Sir Jojo stood on the side and coldly watched this farce in front of him, a faint luster flitting through his eyes. He met Yang Fengyan's eyes, who was standing next to the railing. Before Miss Yang could retract her mocking smile, she chillingly met the young crown princess's chilly gaze. She jumped in fright and hastily retreated a step. Her back bumped into the railing heavily. In this instant, she felt that the little stoic's gaze was incomparably deep and carried a chilling glint that made people tremble with fear. It made her heart pound like a drum, and her entire heart was suspended high up in the air, swaying up and down in a perturbed state. This feeling was truly ominous. Yang Fengyan muttered in her heart and was about to quickly leave the deck. However, she heard the sound of splashing water again behind her. Young Fengyan looked back and saw a big carcass fish with half-rotten scales and bubbling mouth jumping up from the water. It jumped to the side of the railing and opened its mouth to bite her arm. Ah! The two little girls were so scared that they slipped and fell to the ground, dragging young Fengyan down with them. Young Fengyan groaned and fell heavily to the ground. She was caught off guard and fell on her back. It was ugly and painful, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. She sat up as fast as she could and saw two big corpse fishes on the deck, one on the left and one on the right. They swam quickly on the deck and pounced on her, revealing their eerie white teeth. Young Fengyan hurriedly twisted the defensive spiritual artifact between her fingers. A shield instantly formed in front of her chest and back. At the same time, one of the big corpse fish had already bitten her back and was sent flying by the shield. Young Fengyan was scared witless, and her entire face was ghastly pale. She scrambled and crawled towards Miss Ping and the others. Ping was also almost scared silly. If it weren't for the nanny beside her fiercely pulling her, she would still be standing there foolishly. "Let's go, Miss Ping quickly returned to the cabin. Seeing that there were no less than 7 to 8 big corpse fishes that were over 1 meter long jumping up one after another, the old nanny knew that the situation had changed and was somewhat out of control. She hastily protected Miss Ping and ran towards the cabin first. Arbor looked at this scene with a spurious smile and turned to leave. Chapter 48:01. She then heard young Fengyan shout in exasperation behind her, "Stop right there. You! Is this your doing? Your methods are truly ruthless. Everything was fine before you came to the deck, but now, so many corpse fish suddenly jumped up." Ah! The two maidservants only knew some flowery martial arts, so they were already panicking when they saw a dozen large corpse fish jump up at once. Seeing that Miss Yang was still in the mood to leisurely bickering with the young crown princess, they hastily pulled her and shouted, "Miss, let's hide in the cabin first. It was better to let the fifth young master send people to clean up these corpse fish on the deck." Arbor originally didn't want to pay attention to her, but when he heard her chatter incessantly, he turned around and glanced at her. Soon after, he revealed a sly sneer at her. Better not smile, young Fengyan thought. This smile was like using a knife to cut open a hole at the corner of her mouth, so icy that it was a bit frightening. Compared to when she wore a stoic face, it was even more frightening. "You will die." The little stoic's chilly voice drilled into her ears. Young Fengyan's heart felt like it had been stung by something, and she couldn't restrain her terror and started trembling. The dozen large corpse fish slid and leaped up, abruptly jumping forward. With a crunch, they bit down on a young maidservant's calf, causing her to immediately fall to the ground in pain and roll around. Young Fengyan was so frightened that her face was drained of color, and she retreated backwards repeatedly. She shook off the other young maidservant's hand and directly threw her into the school of corpse fish before fleeing backwards. That maidservant had an incredulous expression on her face, probably not expecting that she would be abandoned by her master so easily. She felt pain in her ankle, and she looked down in horror with widened eyes. She saw 2 to 3 large corpse fish biting the back of her foot, unwilling to let go no matter what. The two maidservants were rolling around on the deck. One of them hugged a large corpse fish that had pounced on her chest and tightly hugged the fish's head with a terrified expression. However, the big fish was unusually slippery, and it nimbly broke free from her hands and bit her face, causing her to scream in pain. Young Fengyan was so frightened by the scream that her chest was pounding. She ran to Ping and the others in a panic, pulling her and shouting, let's go quickly." At this time, Ping also did not want to stay on the deck any longer. Being pulled by young Fengyan, the two of them were so scared that their faces turned pale. It was as if they were stepping on a pile of cotton. Their legs were soft and their bodies were weak from fear. They stumbled left and right and crawled towards the cabin. Arbor's voice came from behind them. "Why are you running so fast?" As if possessed, Yang Fengyan glanced behind her and saw the little stoic standing eerily by the door. Her fingers suddenly twitched. A black light suddenly flashed in front of her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, she saw a fat corpse fish smashing towards her face. Ah! Ping Er hastily broke free from Yang Fengyan's hand and flung her away before falling backwards in a panic. The fat corpse fish abruptly leaped in front of Yang Fengyan, but Yang Fengyan stretched out both hands and firmly pressed down on the slippery fish body. It was too close. Yang Fengyan only saw black water gurgling out of the fish's mouth and dripping down. The dead fish's mouth opened and closed with a smacking sound, and the 2 rows of jagged fangs in its mouth made clanging sounds like steel thorns. Yang Fengyan was so scared that her face turned pale, and she opened her mouth to scream, "Ah!" Chapter 4802. That big, fat corpse fish faced her face just like that. The dead fish's mouth opened and closed in front of her, snapping and biting the air, scaring Yang Fengyan into letting out a series of shrieks. However, just as she let out that high-pitched shriek, her expression abruptly changed. A small corpse fish the size of a thumb suddenly darted out of the corpse fish's mouth and flew to her lips with a whoosh, biting her. What would it feel like to have lips with a small, sticky corpse fish? Yang Fengyan's mind instantly went blank, and even her breathing abruptly stopped. In this instant, the colorful world in her eyes completely lost its original color. It was as if the thing in front of her was only a black and white skeleton. Everything in the world lost its original color. The little stoic that appeared in her line of sight was leaning against the cabin door and staring at her with a cold and desolate gaze, as if she was looking at a corpse. She was that corpse. At this time, the little stoic's words seemed to jump out of her mind, "You will die." Yang Fengyan's pupils abruptly contracted, and she desperately grabbed that small corpse fish and fiercely flung it in Arbor's direction. However, before it could even approach her, that corpse fish was struck by a thunder fire that darted out from behind Arbor. With a whoosh, the small fish's body instantly disintegrated into pieces. Arbor's gaze chilled, and he involuntarily clenched his fists. He mechanically turned his head, and his small head moved inch by inch until his line of sight finally fell on the railing above the ship. A air transportation spiritual tool was currently docking and descending on the deck. Young Master Omega Kotoku jumped down from the spiritual tool with a cold expression. The thunder fire ignited on his fingertips and slithered across the deck, burning the shoals of corpse fish in his path to ashes. In just a flash, the corpse fish that were originally still alive and kicking on the deck were annihilated by him single-handedly. People continuously jumped down from the air transportation spiritual tool. Fatty Wintermelon, the tall and thin man Fei Zhuang, and the twin brothers Tang Quan and Tang Li. There was also Ling, that transvestite big shot who disguised himself as a woman and kept her in the dark when they first met. At this moment, he was dressed in white and was dressed like an elegant and charming young master. Eldest young Sir Qin also jumped onto the boat with his men. When this fellow saw Sir Jojo's lukewarm gaze, he rubbed his nose awkwardly. Damn liar. He had promised not to inform Omega Kotoku, but now Omega Kotoku was here. Eldest young master inexplicably read the words damn liar in Lord Xiao's eyes. A thought flashed through his mind, so he hurriedly shook his head and answered honestly, "I swear, I really didn't inform second brother. When I went out to sea, I just happened to meet him." Eldest young Master Qin wanted to cry but had no tears. He thought to himself, the affairs of the world are impermanent. But judging from the little stoic's disdainful expression, she clearly didn't quite believe him. The little girl is here too. Dugu Ling called out happily. Arbor ignored him. Yang Fengyan, who had been greatly frightened, was now in a state of madness. She threw herself in front of eldest young master and second young master, sobbing. Eldest cousin, second cousin, save me. It's her, she's the one who harmed me. She summoned those large corpse fish to bite us. My 2 maidservants have already been killed by her. Yang Fengyan's pupils contracted repeatedly as she pointed at the 2 maidservants who were lying on the ground, barely breathing. The 2 maidservants' limbs and faces were riddled with holes from the corpse fish's gnawing. From her angle, she just happened to see the whites of one of the maidservants' eyes. It was truly appalling. Chapter 4803. Yang Fengyan threw herself in front of the 2 young masters of the Qin estate and wailed, "It's Arbor who harmed me. She was the one who attracted all these zombie fish. Kill her." Arbor couldn't be bothered to waste words with Yang Fengyan and directly issued an order. A white light suddenly shot out from his wrist, and a little white snake transformed into a giant snake in the air. It swooped down and whipped at Yang Fengyan's body. "Don't whip her, she's about to turn into a zombie." Arbor knitted his brows and hastily reminded, "Don't touch her, she stinks too much." The great void serpent's enormous body abruptly froze in midair, and then it whipped its tail at the railing next to it. Half of the railing leaped up and viciously smashed at Yang Fengyan's head. Yang Fengyan immediately shrieked in horror and scrambled to crawl behind eldest young Sir Qin. However, before she could crawl behind eldest young Sir Qin, that half of the railing struck her head. That heavy and ferocious blow immediately smashed her to the ground. She fell forward onto the deck and spat out a mouthful of blood. The great void serpent retracted its enormous body and hissed at her, spitting out a dense black mist from its mouth. Everyone watched as that black mist revolved around Yang Fengyan's body like numerous thin black snakes. Before long, that Yang Fengyan was enveloped by the black power of the netherworld. Eldest young Sir Qin opened his mouth but swallowed back the words he wanted to say. On the other hand, young Sir Omega Kotoku didn't look too shocked. He merely swept an indifferent glance at Yang Fengyan before retracting his gaze. What did she do? He understood this little stoic too well. She wouldn't slaughter people in a rage if they didn't provoke her into a corner. This Yang Fengyan must have done something that crossed the little stoic's bottom line. "She wanted to kill me," Arbor said coldly and left the deck without looking back. There was no need to wait for the result. Yang Fengyan, who was enveloped by the power of the netherworld, was doomed. Who knew what disgusting medicine this Yang Fengyan used to actually gather a shoal of zombie fish over? It was called fishing, but in fact, he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to attack her. In the end he suffered the consequences of his own actions. She didn't know if she had too much confidence in herself or underestimated Arbor. Arbor didn't come out for dinner. Instead, he casually ate some food in the cabin. When the Omega Kotoku arrived, Arbor couldn't help but frown. Even though this trip had the same goal as them, which was to head to the Pool Lotus sacred territory. But he really didn't want to be on the same side as the Qin estate's people. It looked like she had to think of a way to leave tomorrow. The little stoic reflexively stroked her belly. The dividing line of the venerable peach blossom immortal in the seabed abyss. When Duan Yu woke up with a start, the sky had already safely darkened. Inside the tent, the storm continued. A cold wind blew in from outside the tent, causing the candles to sway in the wind. "What time is it?" "It's almost midnight, Your Majesty." Xiao Ku-zi hurriedly pulled the curtain of the tent closer and quickly walked forward. He reminded her softly, "There's still 2 hours left." However, Duan Yu didn't feel sleepy at all. He stared at the swaying candlelight with his obsidian peach blossom eyes as he pushed aside the brocade quilt and sat up. He had been feeling a bit vexed these past 2 days. The people he sent to the River of Forgetfulness to scout for information still hadn't returned, and he hadn't received any news until now. Hopefully, he was just overthinking things. "Let's get ready." Duan Yu pursed his lips and stood up after draping his clothes over himself. His long black hair hung loosely by his waist. Xiao Kezi nodded and lifted the tent curtain. Chapter 4804. A fierce gust of wind blew inside. Duan Yu's black hair fluttered in the wind, and his pitch-black eyes couldn't help but narrow for a moment. When the three armies assembled, it was already brightly lit outside. All the generals had finished their preparations and were waiting for the right time to set off to attack the city. They had been biding their time and sent people to infiltrate Yen City to get in touch with the defending generals. Since ancient times, Yen City had been an easy place to defend but difficult to attack. Even after being besieged by the Tianyin faction for so long, they still managed to defend their last line of defense. The Harpies couldn't enter the city to wreak havoc, but the Tianyin faction leader didn't seem to be in a hurry to besiege the city. He merely surrounded the city as if waiting for the citizens of Yen City to run out of ammunition and food before surrendering. Now that Yen City's defending army knew that His Majesty was outside the city and had secretly mobilized many troops, their hearts calmed down. At that time, they only needed to cooperate with His Majesty and coordinate with him from the inside. They didn't need to fear those bastards who couldn't kill the Tianyin faction. Begin the operation. 8th Young Master Qi led the troops forward and gave the order. A middle-aged general mounted his horse and saluted with cupped fists in Duan Yu's direction. Then he turned his horse around and led a group of light-armored cavalrymen to take a shortcut to the mountain behind Yen City. Duan Yu's gaze aloofly landed in the direction of the light-armored cavalrymen. Prepare 20 God stone cannons. Boom! When the God stone cannons fired at the harpies hovering in the air, most of the harpies were perched outside the city walls, waiting for orders from the higher-ups of the Tianyin faction. As soon as the cannons sounded, the soldiers inside the city walls in heavy armor and helmets popped out and pushed large catapults to bombard the harpies. Coupled with the power of the God stone cannons, huge rocks fell from the sky and smashed into many harpies, causing them to shriek and fall from the sky. From start to end, the Battle of Yen City only lasted half a night. The defending army in the city was truly infuriated by the Tianyin faction, so when they received news of His Majesty's personal arrival, they were all pumped up and extremely courageous. The cooperation of the two sides forced the Tianyin faction to abandon the city and flee. Unfortunately, a group of light cavalrymen entered the city first after receiving Duan Yu's order and headed straight for the underground water protection device. After opening the sluice gate, the river water was diverted to the channel outside the city. There was already a group of water spiritualists standing guard there, storing the water in the channels outside the city. Not long after, the underground protective device burst into flames and soared into the sky. The remaining harpies who couldn't escape in time were all shaken to the ground. Like moths, they pounced towards the blazing fire. Unfortunately, it was not because they liked the blazing fire, but because they could not control their bodies. They were sucked in by a powerful gravitational force, and their faces were distorted as they were dragged down. Duan Yu led the three armies into the city, stepping on the severed limbs of the harpies. The city guards opened the city gates to welcome them, leading a group of commoners to welcome them with tears in their eyes. For the past few days, they had been besieged in the city. It was indeed quite tragic. Those who survived were all covered in dust and grime at this time. Your Majesty. A rider passed through the crowd and quickly came over. Xiao Ku Zi, who was following closely beside Duan Yu, quickly said, Yi, who you sent out, has returned. Duan Yu's expression abruptly changed after he took the secret letter from the hidden guard. Mo Lien and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea. Jojo went missing. Chapter 4805. Crash. A set of fine porcelain on the table was swept to the ground by someone. Trash, you're all a bunch of trash. A middle-aged man with his back facing the crowd bellowed furiously before abruptly turning around. His face was masked with a cold glint in his eyes. There are so many of you, but you can't even take down a tiny Yen city. Now, all your efforts have been for naught. The two team leaders nodded submissively before whispering, who knew that His Majesty the Emperor of Tsang Prefecture would actually come so quickly. They activated Yen City's underground defense system. We were also caught off guard, so no need to find excuses. The masked middle-aged man shouted angrily, "It's because of you trash that you had to hand over the city you were about to obtain to someone else." The two team leaders didn't dare to retort after being berated so harshly. After the middle-aged man finished his torrent of abuse, one of the team leaders finally couldn't resist whispering, Vice Hall Master Ghost. Then what should we do now? Return to the headquarters or the masked middle-aged man they called Vice Hall Master Ghost harumphed. Do you still have the face to return? You haven't even finished your task, so where are you going to return to? The two team leaders hung their heads and slumped their shoulders, not daring to utter a word after being scolded. Vice Hall Master Ghost muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Continue attacking Yen City. This stronghold is too important, so we must take it down." This place was surrounded by water, so the environment was rather independent. There were also defensive systems underground, making it easy to defend but hard to attack. If they could take this place and make it their Heavenly Fate Empire's first major stronghold in Tsang Prefecture, presumably, things would develop even more smoothly in the future. Yen City was their first stronghold in Tsang Prefecture, so they had to take it no matter the price. Take down. Duan Yu repeatedly flipped through the letter. There were only a few words in the message, which only said that Mo Yen and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal were sucked into the seabed abyss. Xiao Qiao disappeared in the river of forgetfulness's explosion. Where did the little fellow go? Duan Yu clutched the letter and paced back and forth in the room. Even though Xiao Kezi could tell that he was feeling uneasy, he did not dare to say much. He stood by the door like a log and bowed his head submissively. Go invite General Zhou over. Duan Yu paused and turned around to order. Yes. Just as Xiao Kezi was about to leave, he heard Duan Yu call out from behind him, "Wait, invite 8th young Sir Qi over as well." Yes. Xiao Ku Zi hurriedly retreated. A short while later, the two of them were invited into Duan Yu house. They were currently staying in the Yen City garrison residence. The garrison lord naturally gave up the best room for His Majesty to stay in. However, even the most luxurious residence in the entire garrison manor was partially destroyed by the flames of war. Duan Yu's current location was actually the Lord Guard's study that he usually used. In the room, there was a brocade couch leaning against the window. When young Master Chirui and General Zhou strode in, they saw His Majesty sitting on the brocade couch with a dignified expression and a pensive look. Duan Yu finally returned to his senses when he heard their footsteps. He nodded at them. The Heavenly Fate Empire definitely won't take this lying down after suffering such a huge loss. Duan Yu said coldly, they will definitely gather their firepower and make a comeback tonight. You must be fully prepared. Have everyone rest for 4 hours first. Chapter 4806. Begin guarding in the middle of the night. Duan Yu's expression was aloof as he said with certainty, we are guessing that they will infiltrate Yen City before dawn and attack us wantonly. 8th young Master Qi's expression turned grave. The city's garrison is fatigued after several days of continuous battles. It's very unsuitable for them to fight again. Duan Yu coldly said, tell them what's at stake. It's their own business whether they want to live or not. We brought less than 5,000 men. If the garrison can't make up for it in time, we will undoubtedly lose tonight's battle. 8th young Master Qi's expression turned even graver when he heard this. Your Majesty means that you are guessing that the people blessed by the heavens will definitely attack Yen City again tonight? But didn't they just lose a battle? Don't they need to rest and reorganize before? 8th young Master Qi paused and met Duan Yu's starry eyes. It suddenly occurred to him that the people blessed by the heavens probably didn't need to rest. Most of them weren't living beings, so why would they need to rest? Taking advantage of the fact that Yen City's garrison was at its most fatigued and lax, it was the best time to launch a sneak attack. We will stay until dawn and leave. Don't reveal our whereabouts to anyone for now. After we leave, carry out everything as usual. Watch over Yen City closely and don't allow any mistakes. Your Majesty is leaving Yen City. 8th Young Master Qi and General Zhou exclaimed at the same time. Xiao Kezi also gaped in shock, his eyes intentionally glancing at the letter in Duan Yu's hand. Duan Yu wasn't here to ask for their opinion, so he merely glanced at them when he heard their exclamations. Remember. Under the pressure of his gaze, 8th Young Master Qi and General Zhou could only cup their hands in acknowledgement. After walking out of His Majesty's residence, the uncouth General Zhou scratched his head and asked in confusion, 8th Young Master, you are a smart person. Do you know where His Majesty is going? 8th Young Master Qi looked at him speechlessly and shook his head. It's probably related to the letter His Majesty just received. There must be something urgent since His Majesty is leaving in such a hurry. 8th Young Master Qi sighed. Since His Majesty has his own plans, we will just do as he says. All right. General Zhou nodded. I'll go find the Lord Garrison now. Xiao Kuzi shuffled a few steps to the side of the brocade couch. He carefully opened his mouth and said, Your Majesty wants to return to the River of Forgetfulness. Today, when His Majesty received a letter from Wang Chuan, he felt uneasy and restless. Others might not know what had happened, but how could Xiao Kezi not know? His Majesty, although he was staying in Yen City, his heart had probably already flown to the River of Forgetfulness. Xiao Kuzi. Duan Yu looked at him seriously and said, half a month at the earliest and a month at the latest. If this matter is over, you can return to the capital with General Zhou and the others. At night, Vice Hall Master Ghost led a group of over 10,000 disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect. They were like a flock of black crows floating in the night sky. They looked down and saw that Yen City had already fallen into a deathly silence and darkness. Apart from the starlight, there was no light in the city. They are already sleeping. Vice Hall Master Gui smiled proudly. His eyes flickered with traces of gloominess. The humiliation he suffered at the hands of the Zhangzhou Emperor during the day could probably be repaid in one go. Chapter 4807. Vice Hall Master Gui could not conceal the excitement in his eyes as he gazed at the black and silent city below, the flames of exuberant interest dancing in his eyes. Very soon, this place would turn into a purgatory on earth. Prepare to attack. Vice Hall Master Gui growled and whispered to the harpies behind him who were lightly flapping their wings, this time, we can only succeed. Failure is not allowed. Yes. All the harpies readied themselves and lay dormant in midair, waiting for an opportunity to move. They were only waiting for Vice Hall Master Gui's raised hand to wantonly lower it. Then, they could swoop down and barge into the homes of the slums below to set fire and kill. Vice Hall Master Gui's heartbeat sped up, and his raised hand abruptly clenched into a fist. He could not conceal the smug expression on his face, and he was about to heavily swing his hand down. After a light whoosh, a streak of water spirit energy abruptly pierced through one of the harpies' shoulders, sending that harpies flying out of their suspended state. Vice Hall Master Gui's heart suddenly stopped, and he saw a large harpies fall out of the air like a sparrow hawk with its string cut. They crashed onto the ground with a bang, seemingly on the verge of death. This was not the worst situation. What was worse was that arrows shot over from all directions. Coupled with the sand, rocks, and soil, they attacked the large group of harpies under the effects of the catapults. Rumbling noises of tremors rang out incessantly. Vice Hall Master Gui did not expect that he would kick an iron plate when he originally wanted to pick up scraps. None of the people inside and outside Yen City were resting. They all sinisterly extinguished their lights and waited for them here. They were going to give them a good show when they arrived. Once the battle started, Yen City's garrison troops and the Tiger Cavalry would join hands and completely seal off the Destiny Sect's escape route. Vice Hall Master Gui gritted his teeth and could only lead everyone to jump down. He harshly yelled with reddened eyes, "Everyone, charge with me. Kill!" 2 well-trained troops dashed out of the alley. When they saw Vice Hall Master Gui's group, they charged forward with their swords without another word. The 10,000 harpies that Vice Hall Master Gui brought were unable to gain any advantage under the siege of numerous spiritual cultivators. They could only lead the Destiny Sect's disciples into the depths of the alley, fighting as they retreated. Duan Yu stood at the top of the city gate tower and gazed coolly at the sky. Behind him stood Xiao Kezi and a group of shadow guards. All of them looked at their emperor with reverence. His Majesty was really meticulous in his calculations. He could even calculate this accurately. As expected, His Majesty had anticipated the sneak attack of Tian Yun's group. Now that they had made the first move, the disciples of the Heavenly Fortune sect were caught unprepared. Looking at the situation, they didn't even need to wait until dawn to subdue Tian Yun, that dog. Vice Hall Master Gui, Vice Hall Master. One of the Tian Yun group leader hurriedly holds onto Vice Hall leader Gui's arm and says anxiously, "Let's quickly retreat. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Behind them were thousands of fire spirit masters. They followed them all the way and burned with all their might. It was as if their spirit energy was free as it flowed out. If one looked carefully, one could see that these 1,000 fire spirit masters were split into 10 small teams and took turns. While the first echelon was tormenting them, the people in the later echelons were either taking medicine, resting, or recovering. Who would be able to withstand their style of fighting? It was simply wretched to the extreme. As Vice Hall Master Gui fought, he suddenly discovered that there were fewer and fewer people around him who could protect him. Chapter 4808. At first, there were more than 200 people fighting with him, but now, there were only 20 or so people circling around him. Not only were many of the harpies exterminated, but more than 90% of the disciples groomed by his organization were dead or injured. Ah! Vice Hall Master Gui's eyes were red as he let out a furious roar. Suddenly, a silvery white flame attacked him. If Vice Hall Master Gui hadn't dodged in time, he would have been burned to ashes. He watched as the small piece of wood that was bound by the flame was slowly being annihilated by that silver flame. For some reason, Vice Hall Master Gui's body inexplicably shuddered, and a sense of impending disaster descended in his heart. He looked up and saw a person standing across from him. He was naturally handsome and elegant. On that heavenly face, a pair of eyes seemed to be painted, revealing a few traces of cold light. Just like that, she silently looked at him. His gaze was too frightening, causing a trace of panic to rise in Vice Hall Master Gui's heart. Naturally, he recognized this man. After that Song Prefecture's emperor rushed to Yen City, the person who turned the tide and reversed the situation was him. If he hadn't hurried over to intervene, Yen City would have been taken down long ago. Despicable little brat. A dark and cold glint flashed through Vice Hall Master Gui's eyes, and his fingers twitched as he stealthily took out a flying spirit dagger from his inner world. Die! This Vice Hall Master harshly shouted and controlled the flying dagger in his hand to swiftly slash at Duan Yu's neck without another word. This time, he had the intention of slicing open Duan Yu's neck and causing him to spurt blood on the spot. Several cold glints flitted through Duan Yu's peach blossom eyes, and he raised his hand to release a silvery white flame that tightly encircled the rapidly thrusting dagger. Vice Hall Master Gui discovered that the flame that Song Prefecture's emperor released was like obedient and mischievous little fish that tightly wound around his dagger, preventing it from advancing even half a step. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He turned around and didn't care about the others, fleeing with a whoosh. His speed was so fast that he had probably exerted all the strength he was born with. Unfortunately, even though he fled quickly, that Song Prefecture's emperor was even faster. In the blink of an eye, Duan Yu expressionlessly blocked his path. "Since you're here, stay," Duan Yu coldly stated. He raised his hand slightly and pulled out a silvery white longsword that was 3 feet long from a circle of flames revolving around his fingers. The flames burned fiercely and surrounded the silver-white longsword. In an instant it was as if a layer of mithril had covered the silver longsword, causing it to emit a resplendent light. Ghost Vice Hall Master had seen a lot of things, but he had never seen a silver-white flame that was so brilliant that it was almost dazzling. When the flame landed on his body, Ghost Vice Hall Master did not feel any pain at first. It didn't seem to feel any burning pain. However, it made people's hearts tremble, and they were abnormally frightened. His hand was enveloped by the silver flames from the Demon Empyrean sword, followed by his arm, then his shoulder, head, and finally his entire body. He didn't feel any burning pain, but he was extremely flustered. It was as if he could smell the scent of death at this moment. No, Ghost Vice Hall Master danced in the circle of silver-white flames. In the eyes of the other Heavenly Fate disciples, their Vice Hall Master's current appearance was simply a bit comical and laughable. His entire body was encircled by the silver-white flames, and he was hopping and jumping there, howling on the verge of tears. Chapter 4809. Duan Yu coldly observed this Vice Hall Master ghost from the Providence Empire with a sneer on his lips. Disciples of the Providence Empire truly indulged in the wildest fantasies. They even wanted to occupy the entire Yen city and make it their stronghold. Where did they get the guts to act so rashly? Did they think that they didn't need to restrain themselves anymore because they were getting more powerful? Vice Hall Master Ghost had nowhere to hide as he was enveloped by the silvery white flames. These flames followed him like a shadow and burned silently. The silvery white light grew brighter and brighter. It completely lit up the night in this area. Vice Hall Master Ghost was like an exploding firework as his entire body emitted a powerful silvery white light. The disciples of the Providence Empire all gaped in fright and retreated several steps in unison. Just like that, the Vice Hall Master in front of them exploded into pieces right in front of them. Like fireworks, the pieces flew everywhere and then completely disappeared. The disciples of the Providence Empire couldn't regain their senses for a long time. A moment later, they scattered like birds and beasts while shrieking in terror. Seeing them scampering away like stray dogs, Duan Yu's lightning-like eyes flickered, and he icily spat out a few words. Obliterate them all. Leave none alive. At night, Miss Ping was startled awake by a nightmare. She hastily sat up and clutched the thin blanket as she panted heavily. In the dream just now, Yang Fengyan's face, which was shrouded in black mist, looked especially terrifying. She was startled awake by this nightmare, and her heart pounded heavily. Seeing that the sky was gradually brightening, Ping couldn't resist wanting to go out for a breather. She threw on a coat and hastily put on her clothes before opening the cabin door. However, she had just stepped out of the door when she saw an extremely fast and slender shadow flash across the ship's corridor. Ping hesitated for a moment before she couldn't resist quickening her steps and following after while holding her breath. Just now, she seemed to have caught a glimpse of Miss Qiao flashing past. Miss Qiao left the cabin so early. Ping suppressed a trace of suspicion in her eyes as she stealthily followed. Sure enough, she saw Arbor's figure. This was the aft of the ship's cabin. What was she doing here? Ping stuck to the side of the ship's wall, not daring to even breathe loudly. However, no matter how well she hid herself, she was still a person with an extremely low cultivation level. In truth, Arbor had already sensed Miss Ping air the moment she walked out of the cabin door, but he was too lazy to pay attention to her. At this moment, seeing her hiding on the side of the ship, looking like she was spying on them, Arbor turned his head and cast a glance in her direction. His voice was indifferent as he said, "Since you're here, come over and say a few words." Ping jumped in fright, but she couldn't hide for even a moment. She knew that she couldn't escape, so she walked out from the corner and stood in front of Xiao Mu while trembling. She forced a smile at Arbor. "Crown Princess, why are you out so early?" The young Crown Princess glanced at Miss Ping Er expressionlessly. She scanned Ping Er's face from head to toe. She saw that the dark circles under her eyes were very thick. It seemed that he had not slept well. The corners of his lips could not help but curl up slightly as a trace of mockery flashed across his eyes. "What? Did you dream that young Fengyan came to take your life last night? That's why you didn't sleep well?" Ping Er jumped in fright and hurriedly took a step back. "Crown Princess, what are you saying?" Her voice was as weak as a mosquito's. "Why would I dream of Miss Yang? How could I, how could I?" Chapter 48:10. Let's not resort to insinuations in front of honest people, so don't pretend in front of me. Arbor impatiently waved her hand. "You want me to leave as soon as possible, don't you? Then that's fine. Get me a small boat, and I can leave immediately." Miss Ping, her small face instantly became stiff and pale. She repeatedly shook her head and said, "Crown Princess, how can you sneak away like this? Our eldest young master saved you. No matter what, you should have said goodbye to eldest young master before leaving." Arbor impatiently rolled her eyes. "Are you going to give me the boat or not? I already said stop pretending. Do you think I don't know? Yang Fengyan's brain, stupid. She's just someone who can be instigated. You were the one who instigated her to make trouble for me before. Yesterday's fishing incident was most likely also instigated by you. You're so kind, using an idiot to amuse me all day. All right, hurry up and give me the boat. I'll leave immediately." Miss Ping Er's face was filled with fear and confusion. She vigilantly swept a glance over Arbor and immediately retreated a few steps, putting some distance between them. Seeing this, Arbor slowly approached. Her pitch-black eyes were filled with a trace of mockery. "Don't worry, I won't make trouble for you for now." Arbor coldly swept a glance over her. Miss Ping Er's lips trembled, but in the end, she was unable to ask the question at the bottom of her heart. Arbor knew what she wanted to ask. She wanted to ask why she still wanted to make an example out of young Fengyan even though she already knew that she wasn't the mastermind. Arbor naturally wouldn't tell her that although young Fengyan had only been fooled by someone and became this Miss Ping Er's weapon, but she truly did want to kill her. If she continued to stay, it would be a great disaster. What do you want?" Miss Ping Er's lips trembled as she asked in a low voice. If the eldest young master knew that she was the mastermind behind the assassination of the young crown princess, he definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Miss Ping Er felt a trace of eerie coldness from the bottom of her heart, and her body couldn't help but tremble. "I already said I want a boat. Come with me." Ping Er bit her lip hard and took out a sealing ball from her sleeve. She seemed to have made up her mind to bring the little crown princess to the stern of the ship. "Crown Princess Consort, if I give you this boat, will you be able to write off everything that happened before?" Arbor looked at her deeply. Just as he was about to speak, he heard a giggling voice behind them. "How can that be? You want to clear the slate with this broken ship? How can there be such a good thing in the world? This little stoic doesn't look like such a good-natured person." Arbor frowned slightly. Miss Ping Er, who was standing beside her, couldn't help but tremble when she heard the person's voice. Ping Er's body swayed, and she almost lost her balance. Arbor turned around to take a look and saw that guy Duguling walking over with a grin. His peacock green clothes complemented his handsome face, making him look radiant. Arbor couldn't help but want to ridicule this person's taste in clothes. Seeing such a big lump of green running toward her with a grin so early in the morning, it really spoiled her appetite. It was probably because the little girl's complexion looked very unsightly. Duguling stopped and lowered his head to look at his sleeve. He even sniffed it considerately. Eh. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with his body. Chapter 48:11. She didn't emit any strange smell from head to toe either. He really didn't know why the little girl had such a sour expression, as if she didn't want to see him at all. Arbor glanced around, and sure enough, he saw young Sir Omega Kotoku following behind Duguling. Behind him was a short and stout Wintermelon wielding the purple gold hammer. Seeing her look at them, the short and stout Wintermelon even grinned at Arbor very honestly. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them before immediately retracting his gaze. Qin Xian's icy gaze landed on the item in Ping Er's hand. Inside a round sealing bead, a small boat could be seen drifting with the waves. If the crimson firmament wave hadn't been sucked into the star domain, it wouldn't have been so troublesome right now. Originally, the crimson firmament wave had also been sealed inside the sealing bead. However, because it had been highly utilized recently, Arbor couldn't be bothered to seal it again after using it last time, so he conveniently stored it inside the star domain. When the little stoic thought of this, she couldn't help but sigh. If she could use the crimson firmament wave, she probably would have fled at top speed 2 days ago. Now that she wanted to flee, she was actually caught red-handed by Omega Kotoku. It was truly awkward. Take her away. Young Sir Omega Kotoku ordered icily, and 2 black-clothed guards immediately flashed out from behind him. They took a few steps forward and walked towards Miss Ping Er, whose face was filled with terror. It was as if Ping Er's body was gripped by immense terror, and she reflexively grabbed Xiao Mu's hand. She wailed miserably, "Crown Prince Consort. Please help me, plead for leniency." She didn't want to die yet. She didn't want to die in this kind of ghastly place. She was too familiar with the second young sir's methods. When he coldly said, "Take her away," her future fate and path were sealed. Qin Xian coldly curled her lips at her. Her sharp gaze landed on Ping Er, as if she was wondering why she was so daring. "Crown Princess, help me, Crown Princess." Miss Ping Er cried and knelt down in front of the young Crown Princess. She reached out and hugged her leg, crying loudly. "Crown Prince Consort, I was in the wrong before. Please help me on account that we are both women." Arbor looked down at her and then looked at Omega Kotoku warily. "What do you want?" Speaking of which, she was also very familiar with second young Master Qin. But just now, Xiao Mu discovered that she was unable to discern any emotion from second young Master Qin's face that was as dry as a dry well. "As a lowly servant, she doesn't know her place," Omega Kotoku said coldly. "What's the point of keeping her? Naturally, it's to let her go to a good place." Putting aside the fact that she always stirred up trouble, she even had the audacity to want to send the little stoic away. Young Sir Omega Kotoku's fingers reflexively tightened. He seemed to have overlapped the Miss Ping Er in front of him with Shi Yongqian, the woman who was like a nightmare in his previous life. He saw Ping Er's face as Shi Yongqian's. He raised his hand, and 2 black-clothed royal guards forcefully dragged the wailing Ping Er back. Ping Er was so scared that her face was drained of color, and her entire body trembled uncontrollably. She reached out and hugged Arbor's leg as if she had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. She hugged it tightly and didn't let go. She screamed in terror, Crown Princess, help, Crown Princess, Crown Princess." The young Crown Princess truly didn't like this woman. How could she have a good impression of a woman who secretly hid in the dark and caused trouble for her and instigated Yang Fengyan to find trouble with her? Chapter 48:12. Moreover, this woman was so comical and laughable. Speaking of which, she should have met this Miss Ping Er in Seacombe Planet's Qin estate. From beginning to end, she didn't have much interaction with her. She also didn't know where this Ping Er's great hostility came from, to actually incite Yang Fengyan to deal with her time and time again. Now, This Miss Ping treated her as a life-saving straw and refused to let go no matter what. The little crown princess inexplicably felt that she was simply crazy. When she was useful, she hugged her and cried for help. When she was useless, she wished for nothing more than to tear her apart. This woman truly was extremely capricious. How could there be such a bizarre logic in this world? Arbor simply kicked that wailing woman flying with a kick. Her aloof face didn't have much expression, and she said indifferently, "Shut up." Her head hurt from crying. Why were these women so loathsome? They only knew how to wail when they encountered something and couldn't think of a way to resolve it themselves. The little crown princess turned to look at Sir Omega Kotoku with a frosty expression. "Can't you speak properly?" This Omega Kotoku was becoming more and more abnormally savage. Every time she came up, if she wasn't shouting to beat him up, she was shouting to kill him. How annoying. Sir Omega Kotoku was taken aback, and his eyes suddenly lit up. "You're talking to me?" Duguling, he suddenly felt that his young master was a bit silly. Wasn't this the obvious truth? If the little stoic wasn't talking to you, who else could she be talking to? Could it be that she was shouting at the air? Arbor was also a bit speechless. She glanced at him and tried her best to be patient as she said in a very gentle tone, "I want to leave this place as soon as possible to handle some personal matters, so I need a ship." Sir Omega Kotoku hastily persuaded, "I heard from elder brother that you were injured. Your divine sense isn't stable yet, so you shouldn't go out to do things. If you have something you need to do or someone you need to find, just instruct the servants to do it as much as possible." Arbor grumpily glared at him. "I'm going to handle my personal matters. I don't like to rely on others." With a cold expression, she added, "I like to do it myself. It's good to do it personally, it's good to do it personally." Duguling happily ran forward and said with a smile, "How about this, we'll go with you. I heard that you are looking for the missing young miss of the forgotten Chuan Dragon clan. We have more people, so it'll be easier for us to get things done." Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. "I'm not looking for her. I have nothing to do with the Wang Chuan Dragon clan anymore." Whether Long Shangyun lived or died, it no longer mattered the moment the two of them turned around. Having eldest Qin send people out to search for her for so many days, it could be considered her final act of goodwill. Since this was the will of the heavens, there was no need for her to force it. After all, the most important thing for her now was to wait for Jojo's lotus and find the whereabouts of the little Taisui. As for the others, Jojo was exhausted. She couldn't care less anymore. Duguling blinked, "Then do you sell beautifying pills?" Arbor. Sir Omega Kotoku, what was going on? Weren't they seriously discussing matters earlier? Why did this Duguling suddenly bring up the beautifying pill? Ever since I tried the beautifying pill for 3 days, I've been wanting to buy a permanent one from you. Duguling's eyes gleamed as he stared at her. "Can I?" The little stoic pursed her lips and glanced at him coolly. "I can, but I'm afraid you won't be able to afford the price." Chapter 48:13. Duguling's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly said, "Didn't we agree on it back then? After 3 days of trial, we'll buy permanent beautifying pills for 2 million per pill. That was the price back then." Arbor coldly glanced at him. "The price has increased now." Duguling's mouth twitched, and he carefully asked, "Xiao Qiao, how much is it now?" 10 million per pill. "Damn, why don't you go rob a bank?" Duguling was dumbfounded, and he couldn't say anything. Instead, the short winter melon holding the purple gold hammer couldn't help but shout. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at them. "It's the market price. Now, the entire capital knows that Jojo's beautifying pills are of good quality and quantity. 1 pill is guaranteed for 100 years. So many people are fighting to buy it, and the price has already risen to 8 million. Duguling, then why do I have to add another 2 million? The little crown princess glanced at him and said impatiently, I only sell 2 beautifying pills every month. It's up to you whether you want it or not. What's wrong with giving you a back door and adding 2 million as a threshold fee? You're getting a bargain. Duguling, yes, yes. This fellow nodded repeatedly, and he hurriedly took out money from his pocket with a grin. I have 20 million here. Give me 2. Arbor's face was expressionless as she reached out to take the spirit coin card that he offered. She nodded, took out a porcelain bottle, and tossed it to him. 1 pill can beautify for a long time. Duguling cheerfully nodded. I still have at least 200 years to go. I think I can live for a long time. To prevent you from raising the price 100 years later, he'd better buy 1 more beforehand. Arbor glanced at him and nodded. You're smart. Duguling, so you're really planning to raise the price 100 years later. Alright, I've chatted with you guys for too long. Arbor turned around and walked to the deck. Omega Kotoku's figure flashed, and he was already beside her. Your body hasn't recovered yet. Don't mess around. Arbor dodged his hand and glared at him. You're still saying you're not putting me under house arrest? Of course not. Eldest young Master Qin's voice entered everyone's ears. When Xiao Mu looked back, she saw Qin Xian, this guy, directing people to carry something over. Arbor looked at the stretcher. When they got closer, they could see clearly that there was a person lying on the stretcher, wrapped in bandages from head to toe. The little fellow's expression did not change at all, but his heart was beating wildly. Don't be nervous, Jojo. Eldest young Sir Qin glanced at her with a smile. It's not Long Shangyun. Who's nervous? The little stoic stubbornly defended herself. Who is this? You know him, eldest young Master Qin said with a smile. That Prophet Tuesday, this is probably what it means to plant flowers but not bloom, but to plant a willow unintentionally, the willow grows. Eldest young Master Qin said briskly, look, we couldn't find Long Shangyun after so long, but we found this prophet too instead. What do I need to find her for? Arbor asked coldly, his gaze sweeping over that bandage without any warmth. Prophet 2 probably heard her voice, and his entire body struggled a few times in agitation. However, his injuries were too severe, and his entire body was wrapped in bandages. Blood seeped out from between the bandages when he moved slightly. Arbor curled his lips mockingly and sneered, Prophet. Have you ever divined that your future self would become like this? Chapter 48:14. Tu Xianji seemed to be very agitated and kept trying to straighten her body. However, her entire body was wrapped in those white bandages until she resembled a salted fish. She couldn't even turn around, let alone sit up. This was simply wishful thinking. Arbor truly didn't expect that eldest young Sir Qin would even find Tu Xianji. Since the sun had just risen, in other words, this prophet should have been found last night. What did you interrogate her about? The little stoic looked up and stared sharply at Qin Xian. The latter smiled helplessly at her. Why is a child so smart? Seeing that she was about to turn hostile, the eldest young sir hastily said, I didn't interrogate her about anything. I just wanted to know the whereabouts of the 5 keys. Without waiting for the little girl to frown and ask, eldest young Sir Qin answered obediently, the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm is guarded by the River of Forgetfulness's 5 patrician families. Each patrician family holds a key, and only with these 5 keys can the passage leading to the depths of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm be opened. Long Huan said before that the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm automatically sealed itself off a year ago. Even if you obtain these so-called keys and open the passage, you won't be able to enter the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm's entrance. Qin Xian shrugged with a smile. Let's try. How will we know if we don't try? A faint glint flickered in the depths of his pitch-black eyes. Arbor stood by the railing at the stern of the ship. Looking from this direction, she only felt that his pitch-black eyes were bottomless. Thump, thump, thump. Tu Xianji agitatedly knocked on the wooden stretcher. Under eldest young Sir Qin's signal with his eyes, two servants reached out to help Tu Xianji up from the stretcher. Arbor reluctantly glanced at her and clearly saw her current appearance. Her entire face was buried under the bandages, and she was currently glaring fixedly at her with a pair of cold and venomous eyes. An extremely feeble voice came out of her mouth. Arbor carefully discerned that this old woman, Tu Xianji, seemed to be calling her Mu Qiao. Hence, her eyes icily gazed over, and her aura also turned chilly. Tu Xianji arched his back as if he wanted to say something to her. The sound of something breaking rang in Arbor's ears. It took her a long time to piece together some useful information from the few words that she had said. Prophet Tu was probably saying Shui Yuan's prediction was good. The Forgotten River Dragon clan that had lost the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl would eventually be drowned in the torrent of history as time passed. Without the shark pearl, the Forgotten River Dragon clan had perished. However, it was too strenuous for her to speak. She spoke intermittently for a long time and was unable to complete a sentence. However, Arbor was already impatient to listen to her nonsense. He coldly glanced at Tu Xianji and rejected her self-righteousness with a single sentence. You're wrong. The Wanchuan Dragon clan didn't perish because they lost the shark pearl. It was because you sought your own death. She didn't want to waste any more words with this old woman. From the looks of it, although eldest Qin and Omega Kotoku hadn't put her under house arrest, they wouldn't let her leave the ship so easily. She had to think of another way to escape. Arbor's eyes darted around before she suddenly turned to Duguling and said, "How about we have a competition?" Duguling's head instantly shook like a rattledrum. No competition, no competition. You're trying to trick me again. You want me to slap you so that you can seize the opportunity to escape. Arbor harumphed and abruptly turned her head away. She naturally wanted to find a ship to leave so that she could wait for Jojo's lotus at the bottom of the sea. Chapter 48:15. Otherwise, she could just enter the water and leave. With her speed in the water, even if the entire boat sped up, it probably wouldn't be able to keep up with her. However, they had the advantage in numbers right now, while she was alone. She only had Ming Ming by her side, so it was best to be careful. After all, she still had to stay in the Sea of Forgetfulness for a while. Even if she ran away now, she still had to guard the entrance to the undersea abyss. As long as eldest Qin and the rest followed this direction, it was useless to run. They could still find her. It was best not to fall out with them for the time being. The little fellow's eyes turned, and she turned around to yawn. Time to sleep. She suddenly stopped in her tracks, and looked around in confusion. Where was that Miss Ping Air who was sobbing just now? She didn't even notice when she was dragged down. Thump, thump, thump. Tu Xianji knocked hard on the wooden stretcher beneath him, his old eyes revealing a furious glint. Mu Qiao. Tu Xianji's lips trembled under the bandages, and he spat out a sentence with great difficulty. Enshun Ti take you back to forgetfulness. Arbor narrowed her eyes, turned to look at her, and let out a cold laugh. Unfortunately, there's no medicine for regret in this world. Mu Qiao. Tu Xianji clenched his bandaged fists. Mu Qiao. Arbor had already reached the top of the stairs. She turned around again, and a pair of eyes filled with boundless coldness stared deeply at Tu Xianji. My surname is Qiao. Once surnamed Xiao, forever surnamed Xiao. She wouldn't change this surname. 10,000-year-old shark pearl. Arbor hooked her lips expressionlessly. I'll kindly accept it. After saying this, she didn't look at Tu Xianji again, and turned to head upstairs. Duguling blinked, looking at his young master, and then at the old woman who was sitting on the stretcher and knocking on it. What should we do about this? Qin Xian's eyes flashed. Throw her down. Throw her down. Duguling blanked, and then stammered, throw her where? Young Master Omega Kotoku glanced at him like he was an idiot, and then turned to leave without a word. You're usually so smart, how come you can't even understand young master's words today? The fat man on the side laughed strangely and hung the purple golden hammer on his waist. He laughed in a hoarse voice, where should I throw it? Throw it into the water, of course. He loved to throw people into the water. Especially now that the water was filled with all kinds of aggressive small creatures. He just didn't know if the old woman, who was wrapped in bandages, could survive in the water for a while. Tu Xianji let out a roar from his throat. He panted with all his might, and his eyes were filled with fear. Clearly, Tu Xianji had heard their conversation clearly. She watched helplessly as two servants lifted her up on the stretcher and strode towards the railing. Tu Xianji's eyes finally revealed a trace of fear. She knew how to calculate and was proficient in all kinds of fortune-telling techniques. However, he really did not predict that he would lose his life in this vast and boundless sea of forgetfulness today. With a splash, the water splashed. Arbor pushed open the window, propped up his chin with one hand, and looked into the distance. On the wide sea, Tu Xianji's bandages were all destroyed as soon as he entered the water. The bandages floated on the surface of the water, unraveling one by one. When the hideous wound under the bandages was exposed, Tu Xianji's heart skipped a beat. She turned around and saw a thumb-long sea snake slithering out and biting her wound. Chapter 48:16. At the same time, a dozen or so tiny sea snakes burrowed out from the water. More and more alien creatures were attracted by the fresh blood that was spreading around the prophet. They crowded around each other and surged towards the prophet. Tu Xianji let out a hoarse and gloomy hiss in the water in fright. Her pair of dim old eyes contained a bit of terrifying hatred as she looked in the direction of the large ship. To think that she, the extremely revered great prophet of the dragon clan of Forgotten River, would end up like this. Arbor didn't want to continue watching. She closed the window with one hand and stood silently for a while before turning around and pattering to the bedside. She had just sat down when she heard the fatty's hoarse voice from outside the door. You mean, that old woman wrapped in bandages just now was actually some prophet of the dragon clan of Forgotten River? Faint laughter came from beside her. The fatty laughed out loud. She's so good at foretelling. Could it be that she didn't calculate that she would die today? Knock knock. The little stoic sat on the edge of the bed and looked up at the cabin door. The plain-colored window was very clear, and she could see several figures moving about inside. Little Chiao, come out and eat breakfast. Sir Jojo was disgruntled. I don't have an appetite. I can't eat. Don't. Duguling knocked on the door again and said with a grin, there are all kinds of snacks that you like to eat. Stop pretending. We all know your lousy habits. 3 meals a day, no less. Arbor pulled open the cabin door with a taut face and glanced at the beaming Duguling outside. Her gaze landed on his face. She seemed to see this person sitting on a small stool with a grin and asking her, you're so young. You don't really want to die, right? People must have the will to live in order to have a future and hope. The little stoic expressionlessly walked past him. Our dear Duguling reflexively touched his face. Strange. Why did he have a misconception that when the little stoic looked at him just now, her gaze was distant, as if she was looking at him through a hazy veil? Stoic. Duguling chased after her with a chuckle. Do you want to eat shrimp dumplings? Do you like green bean porridge or red bean porridge? During breakfast, the little stoic was too lazy to speak. No matter who spoke to her, she would completely ignore them. There was a low pressure on the deck. The row of maids standing at the side were all trembling in fear. When they saw her, it was as if they had seen a scourge or a ferocious beast. They all distanced themselves from her. It was as if he would have a bad ending if he touched her. Arbor couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the crowd. After eating, he made an excuse to catch up on sleep and slipped away. He returned to the cabin and closed the door. The little stoic then took out a storage talisman and a handful of thunder fireballs, placing them neatly on the table. Her small hands gently moved them, causing them to make rolling sounds. "Your Majesty." Lil Ku-zi hurriedly ran in. At a glance, he saw His Majesty standing by the table, holding a brush and writing something. He was dressed in a sapphire blue robe, and there were a few ink bamboos on his sleeves. Her fine black hair was scattered behind her, her thin lips were slightly pursed, and her eyes were focused on the book. She stood there like a pine tree. Truly, the young master was sculpted and polished, elegant and natural. Lil Ku-zi was most afraid that he would leave without a word. Now that he saw that he was still in the study, his heart couldn't help but relax. "Personally hand this letter to 8th Chi, Duan Yu said. "Yes." Lil Ku-zi hastily took the letter and nodded solemnly. Chapter 48:17. Immediately after, he recalled the purpose of his hasty visit and hastily reported, "Your Majesty, the kingdom of Duo Luo of the Grasslands has sent an envoy team here to meet your Majesty." Duan Yu was taken aback. "Now." Xiao Kezi quickly nodded. "The kingdom of Duo Luo?" Duan Yu frowned slightly. He searched through his memories, but he could not recall where this kingdom of Duo Luo came from. "Your Majesty, the 8th young master has already led people to contact them, but the leader of their envoy team keeps saying that he wants to meet your Majesty." Duan Yu was rather impatient. "I don't have time." How could he be in the mood to meet this and that and those miscellaneous people? Right now, his heart had already flown to the river of forgetfulness and was thinking of meeting up with the little girl. Even now, the first-hand information he had still did not reveal the little girl's whereabouts. How could he not be worried? What exactly happened to Mo Lien, that idiot? "Your Majesty, your Majesty." A young eunuch rushed over in a flurry and almost tripped over the protruding door sill. He staggered and stumbled forward a few steps. Xiao Kezi involuntarily creased his brows and chided, "What are you in such a hurry for? How dare you be so unruly in front of His Majesty?" Duan Yu looked up and glanced at him dryly. "What happened?" The young eunuch hastily knelt in salute and stammered, "Reporting to your Majesty, Miss Wu has started fighting with the envoy team." The 8th young master ordered this servant to quickly report. Duan Yu pressed his throbbing temples. "Xiao Kezi, go settle this matter." Xiao Kezi quickly nodded. He knew that this His Majesty could not wait a second longer and had to set off now. Other people did not know what that letter was. How could Xiao Kezi not know? His Majesty longed for the river of forgetfulness, not because of how beautiful and attractive the sea of forgetfulness was, but because there was someone in the river of forgetfulness that attracted his heart, causing him to yearn for that person uncontrollably. Duan Yu left without consulting Chestnut and did not have time to speak to him. Just as he heard a commotion outside the door approaching from afar. 2 figures, one red and one black, dashed through the door and began to fight in the courtyard of the garrison mansion. As the spiritual power surged, 2 graceful figures could be seen, as if they were passing through flowers and trees, circling around people and hands in the courtyard. Red and blue light would occasionally pass through, and the light was faintly discernible. Wu Ruame was wearing a scarlet-red short-sleeved gown. She shouted, "Don't run," and chased after him. She raised her sword and slashed at him. The black-clothed woman on the other side had a black veil covering her face, revealing only a pair of sharp almond eyes. When she reached out to receive the attack, she turned around and saw Duan Yu and Chestnut standing nearby. There was no expression on Chestnut's furry face. His pair of round black eyes silently stared at the 2 women who were fighting. "Your Majesty the Emperor of Tsang Prefecture." Is this how you treat your guests? A few strangers ran over from the corridor that connected the atrium to the garden. The person running at the front couldn't help but gasp for breath. It seemed that he was in a hurry. Duan Yu's icy gaze swept over those people. Xiao Kezi quickly went up and reported in a low voice, "These people are from the envoy group of the kingdom of Duoluo of the Prairie." Duan Yu's sharp gaze stared at the envoy who spoke, then shifted to Miss Wu. "Still not stopping?" Xiao Kezi shouted in exasperation. He angrily said, "Simply impudent to the extreme. How dare they disregard their dignity and fight each other in front of His Majesty? Arrest them all." Chapter 48:18. As soon as he finished speaking, several figures walked up and lifted Miss Wu up like grabbing a little chick. They separated the black-clothed woman who was fighting with her and restrained both of them. Even though Wu Ruomei's arm was grabbed, she couldn't resist kicking at the black-clothed young lady from afar. She couldn't resist cursing, "No wonder you had to cover your face. Who are you trying to disgust with a fake face? You should cover your face, and it's best if you don't take off your black veil. Otherwise, I'll beat you up every time I see you." Xiao Kezi's face was dark, but he was rather curious. Although this Wu Qianjin from the Prime Minister's family wasn't very reliable most of the time, she came from a noble family after all, so her basic self-restraint and etiquette were absolutely indisputable. But now, Xiao Kezi couldn't help feeling curious, and his gaze probingly swept towards the veil on the black-clothed young lady's face. What did a fake face mean? The black-clothed young lady couldn't help but sneer. "What does it have to do with you? I think you're just jealous." Wu Ruomei couldn't help but laugh in exasperation. "I'm jealous of your fake face. You're really thick-skinned, daring to say anything." Duan Yu's gaze was chilly as he looked at the several people from the kingdom of Luo's envoy group who were briskly walking over. A small kingdom that could barely be found on the map of the 3 provinces came to find him so openly, saying that they had something to discuss with him in person. And they didn't even accept 8th young Sir Qi's invitation. Ha! Who on earth gave them the confidence to come here and shout like this? They said they wanted to discuss with him, Duan Yu. And he had to accompany them to the end. What the heck? This whatever kingdom of Luo was originally developed from a small tribe on the prairie. A while ago, he used a grand banner to establish a kingdom, but this small lousy kingdom dared to boast shamelessly in front of him. Duan Yu patted Chestnut's large head and was too lazy to pay attention to this farce. Unexpectedly, the leader of the envoy group from the kingdom of Luo abruptly took a few steps forward and said seriously, "Your Honorable Majesty of Cangzhou, if you abandon us like this and refuse to meet with us face to face, you will certainly regret it immensely in the future. Although our kingdom of Luo grew on the prairie, we are very familiar with the situation of the 3 provinces. Your Majesty of Cangzhou, believe that this humble one and the kingdom of Luo will bring you a huge surprise. Don't believe him, Your Majesty. He had only brought a fake face. If you see it, you'll be so angry that you won't even have time to wash your eyes." Wu Ruomei, who was standing to the side, spoke with conviction. Duan Yu gave him a deep look. Now, he was actually a bit curious as to what kind of surprise this leader of the Doruo envoy group was going to present to him. "Your Majesty, please." The leader of the kingdom of Daluo's diplomatic mission extended his hand in an inviting gesture. He took the lead and followed Duan Yu into the study. Wu Ruomei wanted to follow them in but was stopped by Xiao Kezi. He was so angry that he stomped his feet and shouted, "Xiao Ku Zi, get out of the way. Let me tell you, those people are definitely not good people." Little Kezi said with a straight face, "Miss Wu, if you continue to make such a ruckus, little Kezi has no choice but to get someone to shut your mouth and stop you from making a ruckus." Wu Ruomei rolled her eyes in anger. However, due to Lil Ku Zi's threat, she did not dare to speak loudly. The leader of the envoy group entered the study and turned to close the door. He smiled at Duan Yu and bowed. Your Honorable Majesty, I respectfully represent my kingdom of Daluo to come and discuss the matter of cooperation with you. Chapter 48:19. This is our prairie's pearl, Miss Lily, the leader of the envoy group said proudly to Duan before turning to give Lily a look. The woman in black removed the black veil covering her face and smiled at Duan. Her fluttering eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. Her small oval face had a beautiful smile. Her gentleness carried a hint of demure serenity, and her quick-wittedness carried a hint of craftiness. At first glance, she looked a bit familiar. At second glance, Duan handsome face darkened. He knew why he found her familiar. This woman's face was 40% similar to Jojo's, especially that pair of eyes. No wonder Wu Ruame kept calling it a fake face earlier. Wu Ruame had seen Jojo's portrait before. Whether it was the facial features, the skin, or even the hairstyle, this fake face was infinitely close to Jojo's. Wu Ruame was right. This face really made him lose his appetite, and he wished for nothing more than to wash his eyes immediately. The leader of the envoy group had actually been paying attention to Duan expression the entire time. However, even though Duan mind was raging, he did not show it on his face, so he could not tell at all. Why didn't he show any expression? This person muttered in his mind, unable to grasp the attitude of this Zhangzhou emperor. Logically speaking, when he saw this face, apart from being shocked, he should be wild with joy. According to their kingdom of Daluo's investigation of the rulers of the 3 provinces, this Zhangzhou emperor should be a strong competitor of the divine province's crown prince. Before he could finish his thought, he heard Duan's cold voice, "Why did you bring her here?" The leader of the kingdom of Daluo's envoy group couldn't help but shudder inwardly, thinking that this voice was truly bone-chilling. He hastily forced a smile and said, "Your Majesty of Zhangzhou. Can we talk about cooperation? What do you want to cooperate on? Our common enemy is the divine province." The envoy continued, "The great emperor of the divine prefecture wants us to offer tributes every year, but we haven't had a good harvest. Coupled with the zombies running around everywhere, we can't grow anything at all. We get to the point." Duan didn't want to continue listening to his nonsense and coldly interrupted him. "The country of Daluo is willing to help you become the true overlord of the upper 3 continents." Duan stared sharply at the envoy before him, and he suddenly couldn't resist chuckling. "Don't you think you're a bit ridiculous? It was just a small place, yet he kept saying that he would help him unify the 3 prefectures." Duan Yuezhen couldn't resist laughing loudly. The envoy said with a serious expression, "Believe me, Your Majesty. The key lies in the little crown princess of the divine land." The envoy did not notice Duan's gloomy expression and continued to blabber self-righteously, "Lily's appearance can still be adjusted. She will look more and more like that little crown princess. At that time we'll turn the dragon into a phoenix and switch that little crown princess to your side." The more the envoy spoke, the more spirited he became, and he couldn't resist guffawing. "Think about it. Wouldn't we control the lifeline of the divine province?" Duan also chuckled at him. His chuckle was deep and filled with an icy chill. He suddenly reached out to strangle that woman in black. Chapter 48:20. Before that envoy could react, he heard a crisp crack. The envoys all revealed astonishment as they looked at the expressionless Zhangzhou emperor in horror. Lily's neck drooped crookedly in Duan's hand. Her beautiful face was still a bit bewildered, as though she couldn't figure out what was going on. He actually snapped Lily's neck without any explanation. This man didn't hesitate at all when he snapped Lily's neck, as though he was merely slaughtering a pig, a cow, a lamb, or a chicken. Looking at the Zhangzhou emperor's cold and indifferent gaze, the envoys all shuddered, and great terror flashed through their eyes. The leader of the envoy group forcefully suppressed his indignation and said coldly, "If your majesty doesn't want to cooperate with us, then there's no need to kill Lily. You can just say that you don't want to cooperate." Duan Yu glanced at him with a sneer and flung away the woman's corpse with a tilted head. He took out a handkerchief from his inner world and carefully wiped his hands. Duan Yu looked at them coldly without any intention of explaining. "Take care of them all." As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of figures suddenly appeared from all directions and rushed toward those envoys to kill them all. The kingdom of Luo's envoys were all shocked and hastily resisted in a fluster. However, there were too many hidden guards, and they simply couldn't deal with them. Before half an hour was up, the 100 hidden guards had killed all the envoys. Ing dragged the leader of the envoys in front of Duan Yu and kicked the back of his knee. The leader of the envoys yelped and fell to the ground with a face full of terror. His head was forcefully stepped on, and he prostrated himself on the ground. With his head being stepped on, he strenuously tried to raise his head to speak, and he stammered, You all. Sangzhou Emperor, His Majesty, you. Ouch. Let him speak, Duan Yu coldly ordered. The secret guards immediately retracted their legs, bowed respectfully, and took a few steps back to stand still. The hidden guard leader raised his head while coughing up blood. His eyes stared fixedly at Duan Yu in front of him, and before he could say more than a few words, blood gushed out of his mouth. You guys. If you don't want to cooperate with us, there are many people who want to cooperate with us. There was a strange smile on the face of the head envoy. The smile on his face made one's hair stand on end. Duan Yu found him extremely displeasing to the eye, so he personally waved his hand, and a surge of sacred energy struck that person's head. Don't speak if you don't know how to speak human language, Duan Yu coldly retorted as he watched the envoy fall heavily to the ground. Clean this place up. Xiao Ku Zi hurriedly ordered a group of trembling servants to come in and clean up the mess. However, Duan Yu suddenly turned his head and stopped in his tracks. He narrowed his eyes and coldly stared at the head envoy lying on the ground. He walked towards him step by step, approaching the head envoy's side. His cold gaze landed on the fake smile on his face. Duan Yu suddenly raised his leg and kicked. With a bang, the head envoy turned into a pile of fragments and disappeared before everyone's astonished eyes. Duan Yu's heart thumped heavily, and he immediately ordered sternly. Chapter 48-21. Gather all the men in the secret pavilion and seal off all the major passageways in Yen City. Search for this person with all our might. A clone. The one who came to negotiate with him was actually this head envoy's clone. And it wasn't until just now that he realized something was amiss. If you don't want to cooperate with us, there are many people who want to cooperate with us. The head envoy's words surfaced in Duan Yu's mind, and his expression abruptly changed. Probing, a blatant probing. They came here to probe him. If he was willing to cooperate with them, then they would hit it off right away. If he wasn't judging from the envoy's words, they would probably find someone else to cooperate with. A tiny kingdom of the prairie wanted to be an ant trying to shake a tree and make a move on the enormous divine province. Just as the heavenly providence was about to move, this tiny kingdom of Duoluo wanted to take advantage of the situation. Or was it trying to borrow the power of the east wind in a vain attempt to rise to the top? The heavens were about to change. Were all the snakes, insects, rats, and ants planning to collectively come out of their holes? Duan Yu's eyes were cold, and his fingers clenched slightly. He coldly ordered, Go investigate. I want all the news regarding this kingdom of Duoluo in recent years. I want to know everything, no matter how big or small. Yes. Ing cupped his hands in salute and immediately flew out of the study with several people. Ah! A manservant who was cleaning up the floor was so scared that he scrambled back a few steps. Everyone turned to look at the sound. They saw Lily, who was lying on the floor, staring fixedly at them. Her mouth was agape, and her face was ghastly pale. Her 4 limbs were all curled up deformed, and her entire body was curled up into a strip. Her appearance was very strange and frightening. Lil Ku glared fiercely at the manservant who was making a fuss. "Hurry and clean it up. Don't let them stay here and be an eyesore." The manservant nodded frantically and closed his eyes, not daring to look at Lily. He turned his face slightly to the side and shakily reached out to grab Lily's legs. "Don't move." Duan Yu's pupils contracted as he suddenly shouted. The manservant subconsciously withdrew his hand, but in the next second, he felt an irreversible force pulling him away from Lily. After the huge force disappeared, the manservant fell on his back due to inertia. When he turned around, he saw that the stiff Lilial had actually moved. After a series of cracking sounds, Lily's limbs were twisted in an abnormal way, and she was lying on the ground in an extremely weird posture. "What is this?" Xiao Ku Zi exclaimed, "Protect the Emperor, protect the Emperor. It's a corpse puppet. This woman has become a corpse puppet." Bang! The sound of the door being kicked was suddenly heard. The pitiful door of the study fell to the ground and landed heavily on Lily. Wu Ruame, who rushed in after hearing the news, held an ame piercer in each hand. Her eyes were wide open as she shouted, "Who dares to assassinate His Majesty? Bold thief, come out for me." Everyone was speechless. "Where is he?" Wu Ruame stepped on the door and furrowed her brows. "Where is the assassin?" Lil Ku Zi speechlessly looked at this unreliable miss of the Wu family. He stretched out a finger and weakly pointed at Wu Ruame's feet. The latter looked down and saw a sinister head wriggling out from under the door she was stepping on. It was currently glaring at her with a murderous glint. Wu Ruame inwardly cursed, "Fuck." Her legs trembled in fright, and she quickly jumped down from the door. Chapter 48-22. This guy shouted in astonishment, "What the hell is this? Wasn't her looks too frightening? Isn't she the person who fought with you earlier, miss? That fake?" Wu Ruame was horrified and hastily retreated a few steps. My heavens! This transformation was too exaggerated. Duan Yu's expression was extremely unsightly. What the hell was this person from the kingdom of Luo doing? He actually vainly attempted to transform this kind of shady woman into Jojo's appearance. Were they stupid or was he stupid? This kind of transformation couldn't be concealed from anyone, let alone Mo Lien, right? That little stoic face number 101, who could consistently act like it from start to finish. When Duan Yu thought of this, he gave the hidden guard leader Yi a look, and the latter understood and stepped forward. He led a group of hidden guards and used a long spear to pin Lily, who was incessantly swimming around and trying to attack people, to the ground. This Lily, was also incessantly shrieking. However, her hands and feet were entangled by the long spear, so she couldn't move, much less attack people. Red lights flashed in her eyes. It's not a zombie. Look carefully at her hands and feet. Duan Yu gestured for everyone to look at Lily's hands and feet. Everyone took a closer look and finally saw some clues. Lily's hands and feet were actually connected to a kind of lustrous and transparent silk thread that was as thin as a cicada. She suddenly moved because the owner of this silk thread was manipulating it. It's a puppet with a secret art. Duan Yu's handsome face froze as he stated icily, "It's not a zombie." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and threw a concealed weapon at the beam. A hunchbacked elder immediately jumped down from the beam with a cackle. "Brats, you have good taste. However, this old man can't continue playing with you." The hunchbacked elder's eyes glinted, and he swiftly threw out a pellet. A bang sound was heard, and a cloud of smoke started to diffuse out of the projectile. Then, it suddenly dissipated. The hunchbacked elder, who wanted to take advantage of this smoke to flee with Lily, looked over in bewilderment. A raven bone fan appeared in Duan Yu's hand. With a casual wave of his hand, the smoke that had yet to disperse was swept away. The man looked at him coldly. "You want to escape? Do you think you can escape from my hands?" The hunchbacked old man gritted his teeth. He took out a cigarette bomb from each of his 10 fingers and threw it to the ground. This time, the smoke bomb did not explode at all. Not to mention a cloud of smoke, not even a speck of smoke could be seen. If the hunchbacked old man could curse at this moment, he would definitely want to curse. Unfortunately, his body was heavily suppressed by a tyrannical pressure, and he could not utter a single syllable. It wasn't until the pressure was slightly removed that he felt his breathing become a little smoother that he felt a sharp pain in his neck. He lowered his head and saw that his life had fallen into the hands of this young emperor. The man's pitch-black peach blossom eyes coldly stared at him, and a mocking smile curled on his lips. "Now, you still don't plan to tell me the truth?" I am a puppet master from the kingdom of Duoluo," the hunchbacked elder shouted in a panic. Don't kill me. I will speak, I can say anything. It's useless to kill me. In fact, there are many puppet masters like me in the kingdom of Duoluo. I also know that each of them have a lily in their hands. Chapter 48-23. What did it mean that everyone had a lily in their hands? These idiots from the state of Duoluo made a large batch of people who resembled Jojo. Duan Yu angrily gripped the neck of that puppet master from the state of Duoluo and demanded harshly, "Speak. How did you make this woman appear?" This person's facial features that degenerated after death were completely different from Jojo's. How did the so-called 40% resemblance come about when they were alive? We have a special medicinal liquid. After taking it, it can be infinitely similar to a person. Ridiculous. Duan Yu clearly did not believe this puppet master's nonsense. He tightened his grip and coldly said, "Do you think I will believe your words?" The puppet master's neck fell into Duan Yu's hands, and he nervously replied, his eyes brimming with fear. Your Majesty, I did not lie at all. Everything I said is true." The puppet master felt his breathing becoming irregular again. He hastily stabilized his breathing and confessed repeatedly, "Your Majesty, please believe me. What we puppet masters can do is secretly control these lily heirs one-on-one. We all have the talent to conceal our presence." This puppet master cried out in panic, "Lily heirs are indeed modified from the transformation medicinal liquid. This kind of directional transformation medicinal liquid is more effective than the transformation talismans drawn by talisman practitioners. It can be continuously modified and improved to target a certain person. The lily number 9 you see is the most low-grade modified lily This lowly one heard that lily number 0 is the true perfect product." Duan Yu's eyes were instantly filled with a bloody storm. He gripped that puppet master's neck and coldly asked, "When did you start doing this?" More than half a year ago, at the beginning of this year." The puppet master thought for a moment before suddenly exclaiming, "Oh, right around the time the young crown princess returned to the divine province." The young crown princess probably returned to the divine province at the beginning of February. And it was almost October now. A thought flashed through Duan Yu's mind. From the looks of it, this conspiracy wasn't targeting Xiao Qiao, but rather Mo Lien, that punk. Where's the laboratory? These people couldn't research the shape-shifting liquid in broad daylight. He must be hiding in some rat hole, doing this kind of shameful research all day long. The puppet master trembled. "Why, Your Majesty, I really don't know. Who was the person who just escaped?" Duan Yu didn't dwell on this question and continued to ask. That lord, is our Doruo country's 3 state teachers." The puppet master hurriedly said. "One of the 3 state teachers of Doro, Shintu Jing. Duan Yu raised a brow. Actually, she's a very beautiful woman, the puppet master stammered. She's also used a transformation potion. She was an outstanding pharmacist. This shape-shifting liquid was researched with her as the core. Shintu Jing. Duan Yu coldly muttered this name in his mind. His handsome brows raised as he coldly asked, "Tell me everything you know." The puppet master was so anxious that his forehead was drenched in cold sweat. The problem was that he had already told him everything he knew. Chapter 48-24. He was only a peripheral member of the kingdom of Doruo. One only needed to look at the puppets he was controlling to know this. The one he was controlling was only Lily, number 9. And Lily, number 9 could not compare to Lily, number 0, whether it was her ability to modify, her personal ability, her cultivation, etc. It was not an exaggeration to say that Lily, number 9 was inferior to Lily, number 9. Duan Yu was so infuriated that his expression turned cold, and he involuntarily increased the force in his hand. It seems that it's better to search your soul. No, you can't search my soul. A trace of fear flashed through the puppet master's eyes. Every kingdom of Doruo has a soul-locking pill planted in our conscious. Once our souls are forcefully searched, it will trigger a self-explosion. At that time, not only will this one be finished, even you and the people around you will also be sent flying by the powerful explosion. When the group of little servants heard this, their faces all revealed a look of panic and fear, and they subconsciously took a few steps back. Duan Yu coolly looked at this puppeteer, as if he was assessing whether his words were true or false. Every word this one said is true. If I have deceived your majesty, this one is willing to accept the punishment of heaven's wrath, that person said fearfully, his face full of sincerity. Withdraw, all of you, Duan Yu ordered coldly. Xiao Kezi panicked and hastily stepped forward. He lowered his head and advised, "Your Majesty, you must not take the risk yourself. Your Majesty, please allow this subordinate to attempt a soul-searching to see if this old fellow is speaking the truth." A hidden guard walked out from behind Yi and solemnly cupped his hands. Why would Duan Yu be afraid of a mere soul-destroying body self-explosion? He shook his head and instructed the hidden guards, "All of you, withdraw." Your Majesty. Duan Yu's piercingly cold gaze swept over everyone. Although Xiao Ku-zi was flustered, he knew that even though His Majesty was young, his words had always been firm and uncompromising. Since he had already made up his mind, it meant that no one could sway him. Everyone retreated out of the room with unsightly expressions and looked at each other in dismay. Duan Yu's gaze landed on that puppet master. If you want to verify a person's words, it's best to personally examine them. The puppet master did not expect that the other party was still unwilling to let him go even after he had explained everything. Not to mention, he had already said that the soul-sealing pill had been planted in his head. Once his soul was searched, he would self-destruct. However, the young emperor in front of him was still unwilling to let him go. He was not willing to give him a way out. The puppet master's eyes instantly turned scarlet, and he wanted to fight Duan Yu with his life on the line. But could he? Being kicked by Duan Yu, he was like a weak little chick whose lifeline was being squeezed by the neck. He simply couldn't muster the slightest strength to resist. Duan Yu pressed down on his head and coldly glanced at him. If you want to blame someone, blame your lord for insisting on provoking us. Yellow Springs, hell, don't look for the wrong person for revenge. Ah! The puppet master let out an extremely unpleasant and hoarse roar. Soon after, he felt as if his conscience had been torn open by someone. All his secrets were skimmed through in front of someone else's eyes. There was no movement at all. Duan Yu knitted his brows, and a trace of mockery curled up on his lips. As expected, this person's head did not contain the soul-sealing pill that he had mentioned. Chapter 48-25. After all, he was only a peripheral member of the state of Duoluo. It seemed that knowing so much was already his limit. Perhaps it was because he was smart enough and had secretly accumulated some information in his daily life. As for things that were too core, a peripheral member like him definitely wouldn't know. Duanyu tossed that person's corpse aside. Before he left the study, a wisp of Devil Emperor's fire silently ignited on the puppet master's body. In the blink of an eye, that person was completely burned, leaving not even a trace of residue. Who knew if there was some bizarre resurrection technique among the puppet mystic arts? Let's just burn you to ashes and let you properly resurrect. Duanyu stepped out of the study and looked up at the clear blue sky. Under this vast sky, how many filthy bastards were secretly breeding in the dark places where the sunlight couldn't reach? Xiao Kezi breathed a sigh of relief and hastily ran up. Your Majesty, that puppet master was deceiving us. Duanyu nodded. After all, death from a soul search was not something relaxing or pleasant. Presumably, that puppet master would rather have Duanyu slit his throat cleanly than die from a soul search. 2 hours later. Shadow, the hidden guard from the secret pavilion who went to investigate, scuttled into the study with several hidden guards. He respectfully cupped his hands at Duanyu. Your Majesty. Shadow walked up and bowed as he handed over a thick stack of documents. All the movements of the state of Duoluo in recent years, no matter how detailed, were all recorded in these documents. The study was quiet. After Xiao Kezi served Duanyu a cup of tea, he dutifully retreated to stand guard outside the door. Several secret guards stood silently in front of the desk, like blocks of wood. Only the rustling of papers could be heard in the study as Duanyu flipped through the documents. The hidden guards held their breaths as they waited for this young emperor to give his orders. In less than 15 minutes, Duanyu finished browsing through that stack of documents with a sullen expression. He heavily slapped the documents with his palm. An extremely low pressure pervaded the study. The hidden guards lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. It was written very clearly in the documents. The state of Duoluo was established at the beginning of this year. Originally, it was just an insignificant tribe in the Pingjin Prairie between the Divine Land and Sangzhou. Their scale was not even 1/100th of that of the barbarian tribes. But it was this small tribe that had established a country. Now, they actually came knocking on Duanyu's door and gleefully revealed Lily Er's plan to Duanyu. This kind of probing was too obvious. The state of Luo had made it clear that if Duanyu didn't cooperate with them, they would settle for the next best thing and find someone else to cooperate with. Such a disgusting way of doing things really made people panic in their hearts. Lily number 9-0 meant that there were at least 10 Lily Duanyu set down the stack of documents in his hand and pinched the space between his brows as he coldly said, Pass on Zhen's verbal decree. Command the general of the Tiger Cavalry, Hu Gang, to lead his men to the Pingjin Prairie. Within half a month, I want to hear the news of the destruction of this country of Duoluo. Yes. Duanyu waved his hand to dismiss everyone. Let ye in. The leader of the secret pavilion's hidden guards, Yi, appeared inside the study like a ghost and soundlessly arrived before Duanyu. Duanyu didn't even look up as he stared at the stack of documents with a frown. His finger tapped on one of the papers. This state of Duoluo is extremely mysterious. Chapter 48-26. That's all the information we could gather. It says that their territory is surrounded by man-eating black swamps. The swamps are crawling with man-eating insects and ants, so it will be difficult to pass through. Yi remained silent and habitually listened to His Majesty's words carefully. Flying is prohibited nearby, so not a single bird can pass through their array. In addition, once you step into the territory of the state of Duoluo, your divine senses will also be blocked by that array. Duanyu looked up at Yi and ordered, Take 1,000 people with you. Bring along the best formation masters, apothecaries, and superhumans. We want to hear good news from you within 10 days. Yes. Yi nodded heavily. Having Tiger Gang dispatch troops to attack the state of Duo Luo was only what they did on the surface. What Duan Yu truly wanted to get rid of were those damn Lily. He wanted Yi to lead a group of hidden guards to destroy the state of Duo Luo's laboratory. He wanted those messy Lily to all disappear from this world. What exactly did the state of Duo Luo want to do? After Duan Yu settled these matters, he summoned Xiao Kezi and said a few words before leaving the study to summon Chestnut. Xiao Kezi involuntarily sighed as he watched His Majesty's departing figure. His Majesty said that he would need at least half a month before returning. He just didn't know if His Majesty's wishes would be fulfilled. Miss Shui Yuan's prediction was so accurate. If we can't obtain the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, our entire clan will be annihilated. This is all your fault, all your fault. You are the eternal sinner of the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness. It was you who caused the entire Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness to be annihilated. Arbor abruptly opened his eyes and exhaled deeply. He coldly stared at the fluttering bed canopy above him, his gaze abruptly chilling. Even Ancestor said that it was the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl that chose Mother on its own. Neither Mother nor she had done anything wrong. It was only the human heart and delusions that were at fault. Greed was hard to quench. When they worked so hard just to obtain a 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl, they wasted a lot of time and effort. They never thought of relying on their own abilities to advance, so they wanted to rely on luck. However, luck, this kind of illusory thing, was it something that everyone could have? A cluster of black flames emerged from the ferrule that had drilled out from under her sleeve. You want to use a wisp of your soul to enter my dream and cause trouble? Arbor said coldly, let the holy fire that burns everything in the world take you to hell. Prophet Tuesday, a slight fluctuation appeared in the air in front of him. In less than a second, the air in front of him calmed down again without the slightest change. Dong 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 dong. Omega Kotoku's voice could be heard from the cabin door. Jojo, what happened? In that instant, there seemed to be a hidden soul remembrance fluctuation. The strange thing was, it seemed to be gone now. Arbor's cold voice suddenly sounded. It's nothing. There was a little demon that wanted to enter my dream. It's been dealt with. That would require, I'm going to sleep, Arbor interrupted him coldly. Omega Kotoku stood outside the door and waited for a while. He heard that the aura in the cabin had calmed down and there was no sound at all. It seemed that Arbor was resting again. Omega Kotoku turned around and met his elder brother's smiling gaze. What happened? Eldest young master blinked and asked. Omega Kotoku left without a word. He was too lazy to even look at his elder brother. Chapter 48-27. Eldest young Sir Qin harumphed and rubbed his nose. He walked to Arbor's door with a grin and lightly knocked twice. Jojo? Are you alright? It was very quiet inside. Other than the faint sound of breathing, there wasn't any sound at all. Eldest young Sir Qin rubbed his chin and coughed lightly. Jojo is asleep. Don't disturb her. When the several attendants following behind him heard this, they all revealed indescribable expressions. It seemed like the ones who insisted on disturbing someone else's sleep were eldest young Sir and second young Sir, right? The next morning, Arbor got up refreshed and expressionlessly strolled to the deck of the ship, sitting down to eat breakfast as usual. Eldest young Sir and second young Sir had been waiting for a long time. When they saw her walk over with a stoic face, they couldn't help but exchange a glance. The little stoic didn't seem to be in any abnormal state. What exactly happened last night? The two scratched their cheeks as they pondered. However, a certain Sundara stoic refused to say, so they couldn't ask too much. Jojo, have some dessert. Eldest young Sir Qin grinned as he brought her a plate of exquisite pastries and brought it to her. He feigned indifference as he asked, "Did someone's divine sense sweep into your room last night?" Arbor expressionlessly took the plate of pastries and poked a small piece with a spoon. She said indifferently, "It was Prophet Tuesday." Everyone was involuntarily taken aback. A wisp of Prophet Tu's soul had yet to dissipate. There was nothing hard to say about him entering her dream to seek revenge. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that they didn't handle it cleanly, how could Prophet Tu find an opportunity to seek revenge on her? The little stoic swept a disdainful glance at eldest young Sir. Eldest young Sir Qin immediately sat up straight and hastily said with a chuckle, I really didn't expect this old woman to have such godly means. Jojo, are you alright? If I wasn't, would I still be sitting here with you? Arbor looked at eldest young Sir like he was looking at an idiot. Duguling and the others couldn't resist snickering silently. Eldest young master looked at Jojo with a stifled expression. Speechless, he pursed his lips and said, okay. Of course, nothing will happen to Jojo. How could a mere 2 xianzi hurt Xiao Xiao? Arbor didn't say anything. This meant that she finally acknowledged one of eldest Qin's words. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths speechlessly, inwardly thinking that this tsundere little stoic was truly a headache. Looking at the journey, we should be able to reach the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm in 2 days. You said before that the Pond Lotus Sacred Land is guarded by the 5 great families of the River of Forgetfulness. Every aristocratic family has a key, and only by gathering these 5 keys can we open the passage to the depths of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Arbor paused. You interrogated Prophet Tu and found out where the 5 keys are. Eldest young Sir Qin nodded with a smile. It's about time. We've already sent our men to the various patrician families to search. Let's go there first, and the key will be delivered later. This way, we won't delay the opening of the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Arbor was silent. Among the 5 great patrician families in the Sea of Forgetfulness, the Long clan had dug its own grave, and the Duo clan was more or less dead in name only. The remaining 3 patrician families were definitely trembling with fear. If they didn't want to cause trouble, they definitely wouldn't clash with the Qin estate of the Divine Province. Thus, it really wasn't difficult to obtain those 5 keys at all. Arbor silently ate the pastries and millet porridge. Although she didn't say anything, her mind was constantly pondering. Previously, little Taisui wanted to bring her to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. Chapter 48-28. Now that the 2 of them were separated, logically speaking, would little Taisui be waiting for her at the entrance of the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm? That was extremely likely. That was why the poison-tailed butterflies she sent out to search for him weren't able to find him in the nearby waters. The reason was that little Taisui had already gone far. Arbor made a decision in her mind. She would follow the Qin estate's people to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm first. She did feel a bit uncomfortable, but this was already the best solution in the current situation where her divine sense had yet to recover. Once they entered the mystic realm, who knew if they would get separated in such a large mystic realm? Humph. At that time, she would take the opportunity to stroll around casually. Who knew if they would meet again in such a large mystic realm? Sir Jojo's eyes flickered. Since he had already made up his mind, his heart that had been on edge for the past few days relaxed slightly. In any case, they were going to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm to find that wisp of Lien's soul. Since they were already here, they might as well let nature take its course. Young sir. A servant of the Qin estate ran over with a strange expression on his face. He glanced at them hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Eldest young Sir Qin was baffled, and he swept that person a glance. If you have something to say, just say it. Why are you hemming and hawing? They're drifting back again. The boatman had a strange expression on his face as he called out. 5th young Sir Qin was walking over with a plate of freshly made 1,000-layer pastry, and he couldn't help but say good-naturedly, Kai, speak properly. What floated back again? The servant called a Kai gestured with his hands and feet and said to the Qin estate's silent young masters with knitted brows, It's those people that eldest young sir ordered us to throw down a few days ago after we fished them up. They floated back again. As the servant spoke, he was beaming with joy. It seemed that he also found this matter extremely hilarious. Eldest young sir clearly didn't remember this matter, and he looked at that person called a Kai in bewilderment. What are you talking about? What people floated back? Fifth young Sir Qin twitched his mouth. His memory was evidently better than his eldest brother's. Placing the 1,000-layer pastry in front of the little stoic, the fifth young sir coughed lightly and said, Eldest brother, it should be those people from the Wangchuan duo clan. I saw them on the surface of the sea earlier, so I sent people to fish them up. Without another word, Big Brother ordered the servants to throw them down. Wangchuan duo clan. Eldest young Sir Qin rubbed his chin. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and exclaimed, Oh! I remember now, it's that group of people who were thrown into the sea by the little stoic and had their spiritual senses and cultivation sealed. Unlucky bastard. The little stoic glanced askew at the eldest young sir and put on an aloof face. Who are you? Why was she so bored as to throw him into the water? She stood up and walked towards the railing. He raised his head and looked into the distance. He saw a dozen or so men and women on the surface of the sea. Some of them were lying on wooden planks, while others had activated their defensive barriers. As they drifted, they kept waving and calling for help. The eldest young master quickly walked over and looked from afar. Sure enough, he saw the young miss of the Wangchuan duo clan, Duo Shanmei. She was hugging a large wooden board and sitting alone on it. She kept waving her hands in the direction of the ship while shouting something. My goodness, these people from the Forgetful River duo clan still haven't recovered their spiritual senses and cultivation base. Ling Gu couldn't help but exclaim. The fifth young sir shook his head. They should have recovered already. Arbor expressionlessly stuffed a piece of 1,000-layer pastry into his mouth before turning to leave. Chapter 48-29. She also recognized that these people were the ones who came to the snowy island to ask her for Duo Shanming. Duo Shanming's master, Wang Xian, brought this group of juniors here to cause trouble. This Wang Xian also launched a mental attack on her earlier. That's right, this person died after Duan Yu burned his conscience with the Devil Emperor's flame. The little stoic's memory was pretty good, so she recalled everything after a bit of thought. She recognized that Miss Duo. She originally had short hair and a delicate and pretty small face, but after many days of sea breeze and rolling waves, her face was now completely black. Her hair also hadn't been washed for who knew how many days as it drooped on top of her head. However, what did these people's misfortune have to do with her? Seeing the little stoic turn around and leave the railing with a clearly displeased expression, the eldest young sir thought, fortunately, this young sir was smart and quick-witted, ordering people to throw them off the boat first. Otherwise, the little stoic would definitely disdain him as well. That would be a loss that outweighed the gains. This girl didn't like him very much to begin with, so he didn't want her to dislike him even more. There seems to be a lot more people inside, Ling Gu exclaimed as she pointed at the people on the sea. Why are there 2 children inside? I remember that the Wangchuan duo clan didn't have children in the past. Ling Gu was halfway through her sentence when she saw the little stoic turn back. She carefully sized up the sea, and her delicate brows furrowed slightly. Ling Gu was right. There seemed to be many people she hadn't seen before mixed in with the Wangchuan duo clan. There were 12 to 20 men and women of all ages, and each of their faces revealed a bewildered expression. Let's salvage them first, Xiao Mu said with a cold expression. Eldest young Sir Qin said with a grin, Jojo, don't you hate the Wangchuan duo clan? She did hate the Wangchuan duo clan who bared their fangs and brandished their claws, but there seemed to be many commoners among them. She couldn't just leave those people in the lurch for the sake of the monk. The servant called Afu organized a group of servants and went up to fish out the people in the water. At this time, Duo Shanmei also clearly saw who the other party was. Her gaze landed on eldest Qin, and her expression instantly turned unsightly. Wasn't this the young master who had thrown them into the sea again not long ago? Enemies were truly bound to meet on a narrow road. They didn't know if he would once again turn hostile. Mercilessly. Duo Shanmei was hauled onto the ship with a rope and landed on the deck with a plop. She turned around and saw the little stoic's face that left a deep impression on her. Her face immediately darkened and she subconsciously took a step back. A young man from the Duo clan who jumped up from behind her could not help but cry out, "Why are you here? Why did he run into this little fiend again?" The young man's face showed a trace of horror. He took a few steps back and pointed at Arbor. "You, what do you want to do?" Arbor couldn't be bothered with them. His gaze fell on the few ordinary people who were dragged up. Judging from their appearance, they seemed to be people from some merchant ship. A middle-aged man who looked like a shopkeeper was protecting a girl who was completely drenched and wrapped in a blanket. He stared at them with vigilant eyes. That girl was also tightly holding the hand of a 7 to 8-year-old child who was dressed in brocade clothes and had a fair complexion, rosy lips, and white teeth. Eldest young Sir Qin gave a look, and several servants immediately came forward with clean clothes and handkerchiefs. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.